Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that's gonna absolutely blow your minds. What if Naruto was the reincarnation of Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King himself? Now listen, if you know anything about One Piece, you know Rayleigh is literally one of the most broken characters in existence. We're talking about the right hand of the Pirate King, a man who could clash with admirals in his old age, who mastered all three types of Haki to perfection, and who trained Luffy himself. This guy could swim through the calm belt like it was a kiddie pool and casually split islands with his sword techniques. His conqueror's Haki was so insane it could knock out entire crowds without him even trying, and his observation Haki let him predict attacks before his opponents even thought of them. So we thought, what if we took this absolutely legendary powerhouse and dropped his consciousness into the most determined, never-give-up ninja in all of anime? Picture this. Naruto starts getting memories of commanding the seas, sword techniques that can cut through anything, and the kind of wisdom that guided the future Pirate King to greatness. We're talking about a story where our favorite blonde knucklehead has to balance his own dreams with the inherited knowledge of one of the greatest pirates who ever lived, all while dealing with dimensional rifts, artificial inheritors, and threats that could destroy multiple realities. If you're ready for this epic journey through identity, power, and what it truly means to be a king, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell because you do not want to miss this masterpiece. Alright, let's dive into this absolutely insane story. The nightmare always began the same way. Naruto stood on a wooden platform beneath a blazing sun, surrounded by a sea of faces, some jeering, some weeping, all focused on the man kneeling before him. But that wasn't right. He wasn't standing beside the platform. He was on the platform, looking down at hands that weren't his own, weathered, scarred, with calluses that spoke of decades wielding a sword. Wealth, fame, power, the voice echoed across the square, and Naruto's heart, no, not his heart, someone else's, clenched with a grief so profound it threatened to tear him apart. I left everything I gathered together in one place. The man on the execution block had wild black hair and a grin that could light up the world even in his final moments. Roger, Gall D. Roger. The name came unbidden to Naruto's mind, along with 1,000 memories that shouldn't exist. Shared bottles of sake under starlight, philosophical debates about the nature of freedom, the weight of being called the right hand of the Pirate King. Now you just have to find it. The blades fell. Naruto jerked awake with a scream that shattered the pre-dawn silence of his apartment, his body drenched in sweat that tasted of salt spray and regret. His hands trembled as he pressed them against his face, trying to push away the lingering sensation of tears that weren't his own. The dream was getting stronger. For 3 months now, ever since his 12th birthday, sleep had become a battlefield between his own memories and those of someone else, an older man with silver hair and glasses who called himself the Dark King. The fragments came in waves. Sword techniques that made his muscles ache with phantom memory, the feeling of standing on a ship's deck with the wind in his hair, and always, the crushing weight of being the last remnant of a golden age. Naruto stumbled to his bathroom and splashed cold water on his face, staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror. Blue eyes stared back, not the sharp, knowing gaze he sometimes expected to see. His whiskers were still there, his hair still that stubborn blonde that never cooperated. He was still Naruto Uzumaki, wasn't he? But why do I remember teaching a boy with a straw hat how to use Haki? The thought hit him like a physical blow. Haki, what was Haki? The word felt familiar on his tongue, important in a way that made his chest tight with anticipation. In his dreams, it was a power that came from within, a manifestation of willpower and spirit that could. Could what? Naruto whispered to his reflection, but the memories remained frustratingly fragmented, like trying to grasp water with his bare hands. He dressed slowly, his movements uncharacteristically careful. Today was graduation day at the academy, the culmination of years of training to become a genin. He should be excited, nervous, ready to prove himself to everyone who had ever looked at him with disgust or fear. Instead, he felt hollow, as if part of him was mourning for people he'd never met in a world he'd never seen. The academy building buzzed with nervous energy as students prepared for their final exam. Naruto took his usual seat near the back, but instead of his typical boisterous entrance, he slumped quietly into his chair. The other students barely glanced at him. After years of his attention-seeking antics, his subdued behavior didn't even register. "All right, everyone," Iruka-sensei called out, his warm smile encompassing the entire class. "Today's the day you've all been working toward. Remember, the clone jutsu requires precise chakra control and..." Naruto's vision blurred. Suddenly, he wasn't sitting in a classroom but standing on the deck of a ship, watching a young man with black hair struggle with his sword forms. The boy's stance was all wrong, his grip too tight, his breathing irregular. "Patience," Naruto heard himself say, but the voice was deeper, older, tinged with an accent that belonged to no nation he knew. "Strength without control is just destruction waiting to happen. Feel the rhythm of your breathing, let it guide your blade." Naruto, he snapped back to reality to find Uruka's concerned face inches from his own, brown eyes filled with worry. The classroom had fallen silent, 20 pairs of eyes staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Are you all right?" Uruka asked quietly. "You were mumbling something about breathing and swords." Heat flooded Naruto's cheeks. "I'm fine, sensei, just thinking about the exam." Uruka studied him for a long moment, and Naruto had the uncomfortable sensation that his teacher was seeing something he'd never noticed before. Finally, Uruka nodded and returned to the front of the class, but his gaze kept drifting back to Naruto with an expression that was part concern, part confusion. The morning passed in a blur of theory and practical exercises. When it came time for the clone jutsu demonstration, Naruto stepped forward with leaden feet. He'd failed this test twice already. His chakra control was too erratic, too influenced by the Ninetales' presence. But as he formed the familiar hand seals, something strange happened. Instead of his usual desperate surge of chakra, he found himself breathing deeply, centering his energy in a way that felt achingly familiar. In his mind's eye, he could see an older man's hands guiding his own, teaching him to find balance between power and precision. Clone jutsu, 2 perfect clones appeared beside him, solid and stable. The classroom erupted in surprised murmurs, but Naruto barely heard them. The technique had felt effortless, guided by muscle memory that belonged to someone who had spent decades mastering the control of his own spiritual energy. Uruka's eyes widened in shock and pride. "Excellent work, Naruto, that was perfectly executed." As Naruto returned to his seat, he caught a glimpse of Sasuke Uchiha's expression, a mix of grudging respect and confusion that mirrored Naruto's own feelings. But there was something else, something that made Naruto's newfound awareness prickle with unease. For just a moment, Sasuke's chakra signature had felt different, foreign. As if there were depths to his classmate that even the Sharingan couldn't reveal. After class, Uruka pulled Naruto aside. They walked in comfortable silence to their usual training spot near the river, but Naruto could feel his teacher's gaze boring into him. "Something's changed," Uruka said finally, settling onto a fallen log. "Your chakra control, your focus, even the way you carry yourself, it's like you've aged years in the past few months." Naruto sat beside him, staring out at the flowing water. How could he explain that sometimes he felt ancient, weighted down by experiences that weren't his own? That he woke up some mornings expecting to see wrinkled hands and silver hair in the mirror. "Uruka-sensei," he said slowly, "do you believe in reincarnation?" The question seemed to catch his teacher off guard. "That's an unusual question, Naruto. Why do you ask? What if someone died in another world but their memories somehow ended up in someone else? Would that person still be themselves, or would they become the person whose memories they inherited?" Uruka was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "I think," he said carefully, "that we are more than just our memories. We're shaped by our choices, our bonds with others, our hopes for the future. Memories might influence us, but they don't define us. But what if those memories come with skills I never learned? Knowledge I shouldn't possess?" As if summoned by his thoughts, another fragment surfaced, standing in a dojo, teaching a red-haired boy the fundamentals of observation. The ability to read an opponent's intentions, to sense their next move before they made it. "Haki," his mind whispered, "observation Haki." "Sensei," Naruto said suddenly, "could you attack me?" "What?" Uruka blinked in confusion. "Just throw a kunai or something, please. I want to try something." After a moment's hesitation, Uruka reached into his pouch and pulled out a practice kunai. "Are you sure about this?" Naruto nodded and closed his eyes, trying to recreate the state of awareness from his memories. He felt his consciousness expand, becoming acutely aware of everything around him. The sound of water over stones, the whisper of wind through leaves, and most importantly, the shift in Uruka's breathing that preceded movement. The kunai flew toward his left shoulder. Without opening his eyes, Naruto sidestepped, letting the weapon pass harmlessly by. "How did you?" Uruka started, but Naruto was already moving. In one fluid motion that felt both foreign and familiar, he drew a practiced kunai from his own pouch and executed a sword technique that belonged to no ninja art he'd ever seen. The blade sang through the air in a perfect arc, and for a moment, Naruto felt the ghost of a real sword in his hands, Mado-grade steel that had tasted the blood of sea kings and marines alike. The kunai embedded itself in a tree trunk with surgical precision, quivering from the force of the throw. Uruka stared at him in stunned silence. "I don't know how I did that," Naruto whispered, staring at his own hands in amazement and fear. It's like someone else was guiding me." Before Uruka could respond, a new voice cut through the afternoon air. Well, what have we here?" They turned to see Mizuki emerging from the tree line, but something was wrong. The Chunin's usual friendly expression had been replaced by something cold and calculating, and his eyes held a glint that made Naruto's newly awakened awareness scream danger. "Mizuki-sensei," Uruka stood slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon pouch. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, just observing," Mizuki replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That was quite an impressive display, Naruto. Tell me, where did you learn that technique?" The question felt loaded with hidden meaning. Naruto found himself studying Mizuki's stance, his breathing, the micro-expressions that flickered across his face. Everything about the Chunin's body language suggested barely contained violence, like a predator preparing to strike. "He knows," Naruto realized with growing horror. "Somehow, he knows about the memories." I don't know," Naruto stammered. "It just felt natural." "Natural," Mizuki repeated the word like he was tasting it. "Yes, I suppose it would feel natural to someone who's inherited the skills of the Dark King himself." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Uruka's eyes widened in confusion, but Naruto felt ice form in his veins. There was no way Mizuki could know that name unless— "You're like me," Naruto breathed. "You have memories too." Mizuki's grin widened, revealing teeth that seemed somehow sharper than they should be. "Oh my boy, I have so much more than memories." Before anyone could react, killing intent flooded the clearing like a physical force. But this wasn't ordinary ninja bloodlust. It carried the weight of someone who had sailed the Grand Line, who had faced down admirals in Yonko and lived to tell the tale. Uruka staggered under the pressure, his face going pale as he struggled to breathe. But Naruto felt something deep within him respond, not his own will, but something older, more refined. The presence of someone who had stood unmoved before the killing intent of Whitebeard himself. Without thinking, without even knowing what he was doing, Naruto pushed back. The air between them seemed to crack. Mizuki's eyes widened in surprise and hunger as an invisible force slammed into him, sending him flying backward into a tree trunk with enough force to shake the entire tree. "Impossible," Mizuki gasped, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You're just a child. You shouldn't be able to use Conqueror's Haki. Not yet, Conqueror's Haki." The words resonated through Naruto like a bell, awakening memories of standing before countless enemies who had knelt before his will alone. The power of kings, the ability to impose one's spirit on the world itself. But even as understanding flooded through him, horror followed close behind. This wasn't his power. These weren't his memories. He was 12 years old, a failure at the academy, a boy who just wanted to be acknowledged. He wasn't a king. He wasn't the right hand of a legend. So why do I remember training the future pirate king? Mizuki pulled himself upright, his friendly mask completely abandoned now. "You have no idea what you are, do you, boy? What's sleeping inside that little body of yours? Stay away from him." Uruka stepped protectively in front of Naruto, but his hands were hawking. The Chunin instructor was skilled, but whatever Mizuki had become was far beyond his ability to handle. "Don't worry, Uruka," Mizuki said, flexing his fingers as if testing his grip. "I'm not here to hurt the boy, I'm here to awaken him. After all, this world is about to change in ways none of you can imagine. And when it does, I want the Dark King's successor on my side." The clearing fell silent, except for the whisper of wind through leaves and the distant sound of flowing water. Three people stood frozen in a tableau of dawning understanding and creeping dread. Naruto stared at his hands, still trembling from the power he'd unconsciously unleashed. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he could feel Kurama stirring, the Ninetales' attention drawn by energies that shouldn't exist in this world. "Kit," the fox's voice rumbled through his consciousness, carrying notes of curiosity and concern. "What have you become?" "I don't know," Naruto thought back desperately. "I don't know what's happening to me. But even as he thought it, another memory surfaced, an old man with silver hair standing on a cliff overlooking the sea, speaking words that now seemed prophetic. The will of D doesn't die with the body, kid. It finds a way to carry on, even if it has to cross impossible distances to do it. Someday, somewhere, there'll be another who needs the strength we've gathered. And when that time comes, we'll be there to guide them. As the sun began to set over Konoha, casting long shadows across the training ground, Naruto Uzumaki stood at the crossroads between two identities, two destinies, two worlds. Behind him lay the simple dream of a boy who wanted to be Hokage. Ahead lay the complex legacy of a man who had helped change the world. And watching from the shadows, Mizuki smiled with anticipation, knowing that the real game was only just beginning. The Dark King had awakened. Now the question was, would he rise as Konoha's salvation, or would the weight of inherited memories crush the boy who dared to carry them? In the distance, thunder rumbled despite the clear sky, as if the very heavens were holding their breath for what was to come. The silence stretched like a taut wire, broken only by the sound of Mizuki spitting blood onto the forest floor. Naruto stared at his hands, still feeling the phantom sensation of power flowing through him, power that belonged to someone else entirely. "Uruka-sensei," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What's happening to me?" Before Uruka could answer, Mizuki laughed, a sound devoid of warmth that made both teacher and student flinch. "Oh, this is perfect. You truly don't understand, do you?" He wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of pain and excitement. "Tell me, boy, do you dream of the sea?" The question hit Naruto like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind. Endless blue horizons, the crack of sails in storm winds, the weight of a sword at his hip as he stood beside a man whose laughter could shake mountains. "How? Because I dream of it too," Mizuki continued, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "But my dreams are different, darker. I remember the taste of power absolute, the thrill of consuming devil fruit abilities, the satisfaction of crushing those who dared oppose me." His grin turned predatory. "I remember being Marshal D. Teach, Blackbeard." Uruka stepped forward, confusion and protective instinct warring in his expression. "I don't understand what you're talking about, but if you think I'm going to let you hurt Naruto, hurt him." Mizuki's laugh was genuinely amused now. "My dear Uruka, I'm the only one who can help him. Don't you see? We're kindred spirits now, the boy and I both carrying the weight of lives that weren't originally ours." Naruto's knees nearly buckled as another wave of memories crashed over him. This time he wasn't standing on a ship or teaching sword techniques. He was lying in a simple bed in a small house, surrounded by the sound of ocean waves. His body, no, Rayleigh's body, was old and tired, worn down by decades of adventure and conflict. "I wonder," the dying man had whispered to the empty room, "if there's a world out there that needs what we've learned. A place where the next generation won't have to carry the same burdens." The memory felt so real that Naruto could taste the salt air on his tongue, feel the peaceful acceptance of a life well lived. But underneath that tranquility was something else, a desperate wish, a prayer sent out into the cosmic void. If there's someone out there who needs the strength to protect what matters, if there's a way to pass on what we've learned, let my will find them, let them have the power to change their world for the better. "You're seeing it now, aren't you?" Mizuki's voice pulled Naruto back to the present. The moment when Silver's Rayleigh died, sending his consciousness across dimensional barriers to find a worthy successor. His eyes narrowed. "But I wonder, did you choose to accept his memories, or were you simply too weak to resist them?" "That's enough." Uruka's patience finally snapped. He moved with the fluid grace of a Chunin instructor, kunai appearing in both hands as he positioned himself between Mizuki and his student. "Whatever game you're playing, it ends here." Mizuki sighed theatrically. "Always the protector, aren't you, Uruka? Very well, let me show you what happens when the memories of a Yonko commander meet the skills of a Chunin." The change was instantaneous and terrifying. Mizuki's chakra signature exploded outward, but it carried undertones that felt fundamentally wrong, as if reality itself was being twisted by his presence. His movements became fluid and predatory, and when he smiled, Naruto could swear he saw the shadow of a massive, bearded figure overlapping with the Chunin's form. "Kyoruzu," Mizuki called out, extending his hand toward Uruka. Nothing visible happened, but Uruka suddenly staggered as if an invisible force was pulling at him. His kunai clattered to the ground as he clutched at his chest, gasping for breath. What are you doing to him?" Naruto demanded, fear and anger warring in his voice. "Darkness incarnate," Mizuki replied almost conversationally. The power to pull everything into an inescapable void. Of course, it's not quite the same without an actual devil fruit, but chakra makes a surprisingly adequate substitute. Naruto watched in horror as Uruka continued to struggle against an enemy he couldn't see or fight. His sensei's face was turning pale, his breathing becoming labored as whatever technique Mizuki was using slowly drained his strength. I have to do something, Naruto thought desperately. But what? I don't understand these powers, I don't know how to control them, then stop trying to control them. The voice echoed in his mind, calm and patient and achingly familiar. For a moment, Naruto could see him clearly, an older man with silver hair and glasses, wearing a gentle smile despite the weight of infinite sadness in his eyes. Haki isn't about control, kid, it's about will. It's about deciding what you won't allow to happen, no matter the cost. So tell me, what won't you allow? The answer came without hesitation. I won't let anyone hurt my precious people ever again. Power erupted from Naruto like a tidal wave of pure intention. This time, he didn't fight against it or try to direct it. Instead, he simply let his will speak for itself, let his determination to protect Uruka become manifest in the world. The invisible force pulling at Uruka shattered like glass. Mizuki stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock as Naruto's conqueror's Haki slammed into him with the focused intensity of a laser beam. Impossible, Mizuki gasped, raising his arms in a futile attempt to shield himself. Your will is too pure, too focused. Blackbeard's memories should give me the advantage. Maybe that's your problem, Naruto interrupted, and for a moment his voice carried the patient wisdom of someone who had guided kings and revolutionaries. You're trying to be someone else instead of becoming yourself. The philosophical statement seemed to hit Mizuki harder than any physical blow. He staggered, his form flickering as if he couldn't decide whether he was a Chunin instructor or a legendary pirate. Taking advantage of his confusion, Naruto moved. But instead of the wild, unpredictable fighting style he'd always used before, his movements flowed with practiced precision. He sidestepped Mizuki's desperate grab, used the man's own momentum against him, and delivered a strike to a pressure point that should have been impossible for an academy student to know. Mizuki crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. Uruka stared at Naruto in amazement, while Naruto stared at his own hands in growing horror. I used his technique, he whispered. I moved like him, thought like him. What if I'm not really Naruto anymore? Before Uruka could respond, another voice cut through the evening air, older, more authoritative, and tinged with concern. An interesting question, young man. They turned to see the third Hokage emerging from the tree line, his aged face grave as he took in the scene. Behind him stood 3 ANBU operatives, their masks reflecting the dying sunlight. Hokage-sama, Uruka began, moving to stand protectively near Naruto. I can explain. I'm sure you can, Uruka-kun, but first we need to secure Mizuki and get him to the interrogation department. Hiruzen's eyes never left Naruto as he gestured to his ANBU escorts. There have been unusual chakra disturbances reported throughout the village today. Disturbances that seem to center around certain individuals. As the ANBU moved to secure Mizuki's unconscious form, Hiruzen approached Naruto slowly, his expression mixing grandfatherly concern with the sharp assessment of a military leader. Tell me, Naruto-kun, he said gently, have you been having unusual dreams lately? The simple question unlocked something inside Naruto's mind. Suddenly, he was experiencing not just his own memories of the past few months, but Rayleigh's perspective on the same period. He could see himself through the old pirate's eyes, a lonely boy carrying a burden too great for his young shoulders, struggling to understand powers that belonged to another life entirely. But more than that, he could feel Rayleigh's emotions. Pride at Naruto's determination to protect his friends, sorrow for the isolation his memories had caused, and above all, a fierce protective love for the boy who had unknowingly accepted his legacy. He's a good kid, Rayleigh's voice whispered through his consciousness. Strong enough to carry what I've given him, but gentle enough not to be corrupted by it. He'll be a better king than I ever was. They're not dreams, Naruto said finally, his young voice carrying weight that shouldn't have been possible. They're memories, someone else's memories, from someone who lived in a world of pirates and marines and endless oceans. Hiruzen nodded slowly, as if this revelation confirmed something he'd already suspected. And do these memories tell you who this person was? Silver's Rayleigh, Naruto replied without hesitation. The Dark King, first mate of the Pirate King's crew. He looked up at the Hokage with eyes that held depths no 12-year-old should possess. And I think his dying wish was to find someone who could use his knowledge to protect the people he couldn't save in his own world. The old Hokage was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he processed this information. Around them, the ANBU finished securing Mizuki and waited for orders while Uruka watched the exchange with growing concern. "There's something else," Hiruzen said finally. "Something you should know before we proceed further." He gestured toward the unconscious Mizuki. "He isn't the only one who has been affected. We've identified at least 6 other individuals in the village who have begun manifesting abilities and knowledge that don't belong to any known ninja art." Naruto felt his blood run cold. 6 others, including, Hiruzen continued grimly, young Sasuke Uchiha. The words hit Naruto like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind. Sasuke's unusual tactical awareness during recent spars, the foreign chakra signature he'd sensed earlier, the way his classmates' hatred seemed to burn with an intensity that went beyond even the Uchiha massacre. "Who?" Naruto asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. "We're still investigating, but based on preliminary observations." Hiruzen's expression grew even more grave. "We believe he may be carrying the memories of someone called Dracul Mihawk." The name sent a shiver down Naruto's spine. In Rayleigh's memories, Mihawk was a figure of legend, the world's strongest swordsman, a man whose blade could cut through anything, whose hawk-like gaze could pierce straight to the soul. If Sasuke had inherited those memories combined with his Sharingan and his existing genius, he'll become a monster, Naruto whispered. Or a protector, Hiruzen countered. That depends on the choices he makes and perhaps more importantly, the influence of those around him. The implication was clear. Naruto wasn't just dealing with his own identity crisis. He was potentially the only person in the village who could understand what Sasuke was going through, the only one who might be able to reach him before the combined weight of Uchiha pride and Mihawk's perfectionism drove him completely over the edge. "There's something else you need to understand, Naruto-kun," Hiruzen continued. "These dimensional echoes, for lack of a better term, seem to be drawn to individuals with strong wills and specific psychological profiles. But they're also connected to each other in ways we don't fully comprehend yet." Connected how? Your confrontation with Mizuki triggered chakra fluctuations throughout the village. 3 of the other affected individuals experienced what can only be described as awakening episodes within the past hour. The Hokage's eyes were grave. "It's as if your acceptance of these memories is causing a chain reaction among the others." Naruto staggered under the weight of this revelation. Not only was he losing himself to someone else's memories, but his very existence was apparently causing others to face the same crisis. The isolation he'd felt over the past few months suddenly seemed trivial compared to the responsibility now settling on his shoulders. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice small and lost. "How do I help them when I can barely understand what's happening to me?" Before Hiruzen could answer, a new presence made itself known. Deep within Naruto's mind, the Nine Tails stirred from its brooding silence. "Kit." Kurama's voice rumbled through his consciousness, carrying notes of curiosity and grudging respect. "I've been listening to these foreign memories of yours. This Rayleigh person, he wasn't just strong, he was wise, patient. The kind of human who understood that true power comes from protecting others, not dominating them." Kurama. Naruto thought back, surprised by the fox's uncharacteristically thoughtful tone. "I've seen many of your kind consumed by power, Kit, but this one, these memories you carry, they might actually make you worthy of the strength I possess." The great fox paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost like approval in his voice. "Perhaps it's time we had a proper conversation about what it means to bear the burden of a king." The mental exchange lasted only seconds in real time, but it felt like an eternity to Naruto. When he refocused on the present, he found Hiruzen watching him with knowing eyes. "The Nine Tails is responding to the changes in you," the Hokage observed. "That's unexpected but potentially very significant." "Hokage-sama," Naruto said, his voice gaining strength as Rayleigh's wisdom began to merge more smoothly with his own determination. "If there are others like me, others who are struggling with memories that don't belong to them, then I need to help them. It's not their fault this happened, and they shouldn't have to face it alone." Hiruzen smiled, and for a moment he looked less like a military leader and more like the grandfather figure Naruto had always seen in him. "Spoken like a true king," he said softly. Very well, we'll arrange for you to meet with the others under controlled circumstances. But first you need training not just in controlling these new abilities, but in maintaining your sense of self while accessing inherited knowledge. As they prepared to leave the training ground, Uruka finally spoke up. Naruto, he said quietly, earlier you asked me about reincarnation, about whether memories could define a person. I want you to know that no matter what powers you've inherited, no matter whose knowledge you carry, you're still the same boy who refuses to give up on his dreams. You're still the student who makes me proud every day. Naruto felt tears prick at his eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. In Rayleigh's memories, he could see echoes of similar moments. Roger standing by his first mate through impossible odds, Shanks looking to him for guidance, countless young pirates finding strength in his unwavering belief in their potential. The mark of a true king, Rayleigh's voice whispered in his mind, isn't that they rule over others, it's that they inspire others to become kings themselves. As they walked back toward the village, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Naruto made a silent promise. He would master these inherited memories, not to become Rayleigh, but to become the best version of Naruto Uzumaki possible. He would help the others who were facing the same crisis, not by controlling them, but by showing them that they could choose their own path. And if the ninja world was truly changing, if dimensional barriers had been crossed and legendary powers awakened, then he would make sure that change led to a better future for everyone. Behind them, carried by the ANBU toward an uncertain fate, Mizuki's unconscious form twitched. In his dreams, Marshal D. Teach laughed at the chaos to come, while somewhere in the village, Sasuke Uchiha woke from his own nightmares with golden eyes that held the predatory focus of a hawk. The game was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the incident with Mizuki, and Naruto found himself sitting in an unfamiliar room deep within the Hokage Tower. The chamber was designed for sensitive meetings, no windows, reinforced walls, and ceiling arrays carved into every surface to prevent eavesdropping. Across from him sat 2 other figures, both around his age, both carrying the same haunted look in their eyes that Naruto had grown accustomed to seeing in his mirror. Sasuke Uchiha sat with perfect posture, his hands folded precisely in his lap, but his dark eyes held a predatory stillness that reminded Naruto uncomfortably of Rayleigh's memories of Dracul Mihawk. Every few seconds, Sasuke's gaze would flick to the katana resting against the wall, a blade that shouldn't have been in a 12-year-old's possession, yet somehow looked perfectly natural there. The third figure was someone Naruto barely knew from the academy, Neji Hyuga, whose Byakugan was currently active despite there being no apparent threat. But what made Naruto's inherited awareness prickle with unease was the way Neji's chakra moved, not in the traditional gentle flow of the Hyuga style, but with the controlled precision of someone who had once commanded the seas themselves. So, Sasuke said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar formality, we're all experiencing the same phenomenon, foreign memories bleeding through from another world. His hand twitched almost imperceptibly toward the sword. The question is whether we view this as a curse or an opportunity. An opportunity, Neji's voice was colder than Naruto remembered, tinged with an authority that seemed to come from years of commanding men in battle. We're losing ourselves to the echoes of the dead. How is that an opportunity? Before Sasuke could respond, Naruto felt a familiar presence stir within his consciousness. Rayleigh's memories weren't just knowledge, they carried emotional weight, personality fragments, and in moments like this, something approaching actual guidance. This is delicate, the old pirate's voice whispered in his mind. 3 kings in one room, all struggling with inherited power. Handle this wrong and you'll have a war on your hands. Maybe, Naruto said carefully, we should start by figuring out who we're dealing with. I mean, whose memories we've inherited. Sasuke's eyes narrowed slightly. You first. Silver's Rayleigh, Naruto replied without hesitation, first mate of the Pirate King's crew. They called him the Dark King. A flicker of something, respect, recognition, passed through Sasuke's expression. Dracul Mihawk, the world's strongest swordsman, his hand moved to rest on the katana's hilt. And you, he asked, turning to Neji. Neji was quiet for a long moment, his Byakugan still active as if he were studying something the others couldn't see. Edward Newgate, he said finally. Whitebeard, the strongest man in the world. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. In Rayleigh's memories, Whitebeard was a figure of almost mythical proportions, a man who could literally shake the world with his power, whose mere presence on a battlefield could turn the tide of wars, if Neji had inherited those memories. That explains the chakra fluctuations we've been detecting, came a new voice from the doorway. The third Hokage entered, followed by a tall man with wild white hair whom Naruto recognized but had never met. And I believe introductions are in order. Boys, this is Jiraiya of the Sannin. He's been researching dimensional phenomena for several decades. Jiraiya studied the three boys with an expression that mixed curiosity with concern. So you're the ones causing all the fuss. I have to say, your chakra signatures are unlike anything I've ever encountered. He pulled out a small notebook and began scribbling observations. The dimensional barriers between worlds aren't supposed to be permeable to consciousness, yet here you are, living proof that something fundamental has changed. Changed how? Naruto asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. That's what we're trying to determine, Hiruzen replied, settling into a chair across from them. But first, we need to assess the extent of your integration with these inherited memories. Sasuke, if you would demonstrate your current capabilities. Sasuke stood with fluid grace, his movements carrying an economy of motion that spoke of supreme confidence. He drew the katana in one smooth motion, and Naruto's breath caught in his throat. The blade was beautiful, a work of art that seemed to drink in the light around it. But more than that, the way Sasuke held it was perfect. Not the tentative grip of a student learning swordplay, but the assured stance of someone who had mastered every aspect of their craft. Tsubeim Gishi, Sasuke said simply. What followed was a display of swordsmanship that defied physics. Sasuke's blade moved in 3 simultaneous strikes, an impossible technique that seemed to cut through the very air itself. The practiced dummy across the room fell apart in perfectly symmetrical pieces. Impossible, Jiraiya breathed, his notebook forgotten in his hand. That technique creates 3 separate slashes from a single swing. It's not just superhuman, it's supernatural. Sasuke sheathed the blade with the same fluid motion he'd used to draw it. Mihawk's memories aren't just knowledge, they come with muscle memory, instinctive understanding of sword techniques that took him decades to master. His eyes met Naruto's. I assume you're experiencing something similar with this Haki ability. Before Naruto could answer, Neji stood as well. Perhaps we should address the elephant in the room, he said, his voice carrying an edge of barely controlled power. These aren't just memories we've inherited. They're fragments of will, pieces of souls that have somehow crossed dimensional barriers to find new hosts. He extended one hand toward the reinforced wall, his chakra flaring in a way that made the entire room vibrate. Gura no Mi, he said quietly. The wall cracked, not from physical impact, but from some fundamental disruption in the space around it. Hairline fractures spread outward from where Neji's power was focused, and Naruto could swear he felt the building itself sway slightly. Stop, Hiruzen commanded, rising from his chair. This facility isn't designed to withstand earthquake-level forces. Neji lowered his hand, but the demonstration had made its point. The power he just displayed was beyond anything a genin should possess, beyond what most jonin could achieve. The memories come with everything, Neji continued, his voice now carrying the weight of someone who had commanded respect through sheer presence alone. Knowledge, skills, and most dangerously, the personalities of their original owners. He's right to be concerned, Rayleigh's voice whispered in Naruto's mind. Whitebeard was a good man, but he was also prideful, protective to a fault, and absolutely ruthless when his family was threatened. If Neji starts thinking of Konoha as his territory, which brings us to the real question, Sasuke said, his hand still resting on his sword hilt. Are we still ourselves, or are we becoming them? The question hung in the air like a sword blade. It was the same fear that had been eating at Naruto for months, the terror that he was losing his identity piece by piece, becoming nothing more than a vessel for someone else's will. There's something else, Jiraiya said, his voice unusually serious. Something we've observed in the past few days. The 3 of you aren't the only ones affected, but you seem to be the anchors, for lack of a better word. When one of you has an intense emotional response or uses your inherited abilities, it triggers reactions in others throughout the village. Others? Naruto asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. 6 confirmed cases so far, Hiruzen replied, including your teammate Sakura Haruno, who appears to have inherited memories from someone called Nico Robin. The name hit Naruto like a physical blow. In Rayleigh's memories, Robin was a figure of tragedy and strength, a brilliant archaeologist who had carried the burden of forbidden knowledge, who had spent years running from a government that wanted her dead for simply existing. If Sakura had inherited those memories along with Robin's paranoia and survival instincts, the team assignments, Naruto realized with growing horror. They weren't random, were they? Hiruzen's expression confirmed his suspicions. We've been monitoring the situation since the first manifestations occurred. The psychological profiles of your inherited memories suggested certain compatibility issues that needed to be carefully managed. You put us together because you were afraid of what we might become separately, Sasuke said, his voice flat with accusation. We put you together because we believed you might be able to help each other maintain your humanity, Hiruzen corrected. These memories you've inherited, they represent some of the most powerful individuals from their world. But they also represent people who understood the importance of bonds, of having something worth protecting. Smart old man, Rayleigh's voice murmured approvingly. Roger's crew stayed together because we understood that power without purpose is just destruction waiting to happen. Speaking of which, Jiraiya interjected, we need to discuss training. Not just in controlling your new abilities, but in maintaining psychological separation between your original personalities and your inherited memories. Neji frowned. Is that even possible? These memories, they're not just knowledge. They carry emotional weight, instinctive reactions, fundamental changes to how we perceive the world. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, Naruto said quietly, causing both of his companions to look at him in surprise. I mean, yes, it's terrifying. Yes, I sometimes feel like I'm losing myself. But the person whose memories I've inherited wasn't evil. He was someone who spent his life protecting people, guiding young pirates toward their dreams, standing against tyranny and oppression. He looked at each of them in turn. If we're going to have these memories anyway, maybe we should focus on taking the best parts of what they have to offer while staying true to who we are. Sasuke was quiet for a moment, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the Uchiha clan symbol on his shirt. Mihawk was solitary by choice, he said finally. He pursued perfection above all else, believing that true strength could only be achieved alone. His eyes met Naruto's. But you're suggesting we do the opposite. That we use these inherited memories to become stronger together. That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Naruto replied, feeling more certain of himself than he had in months. Rayleigh's strongest memories aren't of individual achievements. They're of the crew he served with, the people he protected, the legacy he helped create by standing beside his friends. Well said, kid, Rayleigh's voice carried warm approval. Roger always said that the strongest treasure was the bonds you forged with others. Neji studied them both with his active Byakugan, as if trying to see something beyond the physical. Whitebeard called his crew his family, he said slowly. Even enemies who joined his crew became his sons and daughters. He believed that protecting your family was worth any sacrifice. Then maybe that's our answer, Naruto said, standing up and extending his hand toward the center of their small circle. We don't try to fight these memories or pretend they don't exist. We use them to become the kind of people our village needs us to be. Sasuke looked at the extended hand for a long moment. In his eyes, Naruto could see the internal battle between Uchiha pride, Mihawk's solitary nature, and something deeper, a desperate desire for connection that neither personality wanted to admit. Finally, Sasuke placed his hand on top of Naruto's. The world's strongest swordsman in service to a king, he said with a slight smile. I suppose stranger alliances have been formed. Neji was the last to join them, his hand completing their circle. And the strongest man in the world to protect his family, he added, his voice carrying a warmth that hadn't been there before. As their hands touched, something extraordinary happened. Naruto felt a resonance between them, not just physical contact, but a connection between the inherited memories themselves. For just a moment, he could sense Rayleigh's approval, Mihawk's grudging respect, and Whitebeard's fierce protective love all harmonizing together. Interesting, Jiraiya murmured, scribbling frantically in his notebook. Your chakra signatures are synchronizing. It's as if the original owners of these memories are approving of your decision to work together. Which brings us to your first mission, Hiruzen said, his expression growing serious. There have been reports of unusual activity in the Land of Waves. A bridge builder named Tazuna has requested protection, but our intelligence suggests there may be more to this assignment than initially apparent. Naruto felt a chill run down his spine. In Rayleigh's memories, the name Tazuna didn't ring any bells, but something about the situation felt significant, like a piece of destiny clicking into place. What kind of unusual activity? Sasuke asked, his tactical mind already working. Reports of a swordsman who uses techniques that don't belong to any known style, Hiruzen replied. Someone who seems to possess knowledge of combat forms from elsewhere. The implication was clear. They weren't the only ones whose world had been touched by dimensional echoes. Somewhere in the land of waves, another person was struggling with inherited memories and powers. There's something else, Jiraiya added, his expression grave. The chakra disturbances we've been tracking, they're not random. There's a pattern to them, almost like a network of connected points. If our theory is correct, these dimensional echoes are spreading, and each new awakening makes the next one more likely. Naruto felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a familiar cloak. This wasn't just about helping his teammates anymore. If their very existence was causing more people to experience the same identity crisis they'd been through, then they had an obligation to help however they could. "When do we leave?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning," Hiruzen replied. "Kakashi will be your Jonin instructor and he's been briefed on your unique circumstances. But remember, this is still a C-rank mission on paper. You're expected to behave like genin, not like reincarnated legends." As the meeting concluded and they prepared to leave, Sasuke caught Naruto's arm. "Before we go," he said quietly, "there's something you should know. These memories we've inherited, they don't just contain knowledge and skills, they also contain warnings." "Warnings about what?" Sasuke's expression was grim. "About what happens when people with this kind of power stop caring about protecting others and start focusing on their own desires." Mihawk's memories include encounters with others from his world, people who used their strength to dominate rather than defend. Neji nodded in agreement. Whitebeard faced many enemies who believed might makes right. Some of them started as heroes. The unspoken message was clear. They were walking a razor's edge between salvation and damnation. The memories they'd inherited could make them the greatest protectors their world had ever known, or they could corrupt them into the very thing they were meant to fight against. As they left the meeting room and prepared for their first mission as Team 7, Naruto made another silent promise. Whatever challenges lay ahead in the land of waves, whatever enemies they might face, he would not let the power he'd inherited change who he was at his core. He was Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage, and no amount of inherited memories would make him forget that dream. But even as he made that promise, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning that sounded suspiciously like Rayleigh's gentle wisdom. "The road to hell, kid, is paved with good intentions, and the strongest chains are the ones we forge for ourselves." The morning mist clung to the water like ghostly fingers as Team 7's boat cut through the calm surface toward the land of waves. Naruto sat at the bow, his enhanced perception allowing him to sense the tension radiating from their client, Tazuna, even through the old man's gruff exterior. Kakashi lounged in his typical relaxed manner, but Naruto's inherited awareness caught the subtle signs of alertness. The way his sensei's visible eye tracked every shadow on the water, how his hand rested casually near his weapon pouch. Their Jonin instructor knew more about this mission than he was letting on. "So," Sakura said, breaking the comfortable silence, "has anyone else been having weird dreams lately?" The question made everyone in the boat tense slightly. Since their meeting 3 days ago, they'd all been more aware of the subtle changes in their teammates' behavior. Sakura's analytical mind had sharpened to an almost frightening degree, and she'd begun asking probing questions that suggested knowledge far beyond her academy training. "What kind of dreams?" Sasuke asked carefully, his hand unconsciously moving to rest on his sword hilt. "Historical ones," Sakura replied, her green eyes holding depths that hadn't been there a week ago. "About ancient civilizations, forbidden knowledge, and governments that would kill to keep certain truths buried." She looked directly at Naruto. "Dreams about a world where knowledge itself was considered a crime." Nico Robin, Naruto realized with a sinking heart. The brilliant archaeologist whose thirst for knowledge had made her a target from childhood, who had spent 20 years running from a government that wanted her dead simply for being able to read ancient texts. If Sakura had inherited those memories along with Robin's paranoia and survival instincts. "Sakura-chan," Naruto said gently, "we need to talk, all of us, about what's been happening." Before she could respond, Kakashi held up a hand for silence. His visible eye had gone sharp, focused on something in the mist ahead of them. "Everyone down," he commanded quietly. "We're not alone." The attack came without warning, a massive sword spinning through the air like a buzzsaw, aimed directly at their boat. But instead of the chaotic scramble Naruto would have expected from his team a week ago, they moved with coordinated precision. Sasuke's hand found his katana, ready to deflect the massive blade if necessary. Neji activated his Byakugan, scanning for additional threats. And Naruto felt his consciousness expand, touching the edges of advanced observation Haki. Time seemed to slow as he read the trajectory of the spinning sword, the position of their hidden attacker, and most importantly, the killing intent radiating from multiple sources hidden in the mist. 3 enemies, he said quietly, his voice carrying Rayleigh's calm authority. 1 on the water directly ahead, 2 more flanking from the left. The one throwing the sword is a distraction. The real attack is coming from above, Neji shouted, his Byakugan tracking movement through the mist. A figure dropped from overhead, a man wrapped in bandages with wild dark hair, moving with the fluid grace of a master assassin. But as he descended toward their boat, something unexpected happened. Naruto's conqueror's Haki flared unconsciously, a pulse of pure willpower that sent ripples across the water's surface. The bandaged man Zabuza, Naruto's inherited memories supplied, stumbled mid-attack, his eyes widening in shock. That presence, Zabuza breathed as he landed heavily in the boat, his massive sword embedded in the wooden deck. I know that presence. For a moment, confusion reigned. Zabuza stared at Naruto with an expression of dawning recognition while the rest of Team 7 prepared for battle. But then the missing nin's eyes went distant, as if he were seeing something that existed only in memory. That feeling, Zabuza murmured, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of reverence, like standing before Whitebeard himself. But that's impossible unless you remember too, Naruto said, understanding flooding through him. You have memories from their world. Zabuza's grip on his sword shifted, but instead of attacking, he seemed to be struggling with internal conflict. Edward teach, he said slowly. Marshall D teach Blackbeard's memories, but they're fragmented, incomplete. His eyes narrowed. But your presence is clear, focused. Who were you? Silver's Rayleigh, Naruto replied, feeling the weight of that name settle around him like a familiar cloak. And if you carry Blackbeard's memories, then you know why I can't let you hurt innocent people. The tension in the boat was palpable. Kakashi had his Sharingan revealed, ready to intervene, while Sasuke's hand gripped his katana with white knuckles. But Naruto held up a hand, signaling for patience. You're not him, Naruto continued, his voice carrying the patient wisdom that had once guided pirates toward their dreams. You're Mamachi Zabuza, the demon of the mist. You have your own code, your own reasons for what you do. Don't let someone else's darkness define you. For a moment, something almost like gratitude flickered in Zabuza's eyes, but then his expression hardened again and he hefted his massive sword. Pretty words, kid. But I have a job to do. He glanced at Tazuna, who was cowering behind Kakashi. Nothing personal, old man, just business. Then let's make it personal, came a new voice from the mist. A figure stepped onto the water's surface as if it were solid ground, a young person with long dark hair and wearing a hunter nin mask. But Naruto's enhanced senses immediately identified the newcomer as something more complex than a simple tracker. Haku, Zabuza said, his voice carrying notes of both warning and affection. I told you to stay back, and I told you that I would follow you anywhere, Zabuza-sama. The masked figure's voice was gentle but determined. Even into memories that don't belong to us. Haku removed the mask, revealing delicate features and eyes that held far too much knowledge for someone so young. I've been having dreams too, Haku continued, looking directly at Naruto. Dreams of a woman with blue hair who could command the very elements themselves. Dreams of power that came not from hatred, but from love. Nefertari Vivi, Naruto realized with a start. The former princess of Alabasta who had sacrificed everything to save her kingdom. If Haku had inherited those memories. This is getting complicated, Kakashi muttered, his Sharingan tracking the interplay of chakra signatures around them. 4 confirmed cases of dimensional memory inheritance all in one location. That can't be a coincidence. It's not, Sakura said quietly, her analytical mind working through the implications. If Robin's memories are accurate, this kind of convergence suggests we're near some kind of focal point, a place where the barriers between dimensions are particularly thin. Zabuza's eyes sharpened. The bridge, he said suddenly. There's something about that damn bridge. Ever since construction began, I've been having more vivid dreams, stronger reactions to these foreign memories. Tazuna paled. The bridge is just a bridge, he protested weakly. There's nothing special about it. You're lying, Neji said flatly, his Byakugan allowing him to read the old man's physical responses. Your heart rate just doubled and your chakra signature spiked with fear. Before Tazuna could respond, the mist around them began to swirl unnaturally. But this wasn't Zabuza's hidden mist technique, this was something else entirely, something that made Naruto's inherited awareness scream warnings. A new figure emerged from the fog, floating above the water with an aura of casual menace that made everyone in the boat tense. The man was tall and pale, with slick-back hair and a cruel smile that spoke of casual sadism. Well, the newcomer said, his voice carrying an authority that made even Zabuza straighten slightly. What have we here? A gathering of the awakened, and right where I expected to find them. Gato, Tazuna breathed, his face going white with terror, but Naruto's enhanced perception was telling him something else entirely. This wasn't just a corrupt businessman, there was something fundamentally wrong with Gato's chakra signature, something that felt familiar from the darkest corners of Rayleigh's memories. You're not Gato, Naruto said, his voice carrying deadly certainty. You're wearing his face, but you're someone else entirely. The false Gato smiled wider, and for a moment his appearance flickered, revealing something underneath, a figure that made Naruto's blood run cold. Very perceptive, the entity said, dropping all pretense. Though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. After all, you carry the memories of someone who knew me quite well. The illusion fell away completely, revealing a man in a dark coat with multiple flintlock pistols at his belt. His presence radiated the kind of casual malevolence that came from decades of betrayal and murder. Marshal D. Teach, Sasuke breathed, recognizing the figure from Mihawk's memories. In the flesh, so to speak, Blackbeard replied with his characteristic laugh. Though this body isn't quite what I'm used to, still, it serves its purpose. Impossible, Zabuza snarled, his fragmented memories warring with what he was seeing. You're dead, we all saw you die at Marineforge. Death is such a limited concept, Blackbeard replied casually. Especially when you possess the power to consume devil fruits to steal the abilities of others. His grin turned predatory. Tell me, do any of you understand what's really happening here? Why we've all been drawn to this insignificant little island? The question hung in the air like a sword blade. Around them, the mist continued to swirl unnaturally, and Naruto could feel something building, a convergence of power that threatened to tear reality itself apart. The bridge isn't just a bridge, Sakura said suddenly, her inherited analytical abilities working through the puzzle. It's built on a dimensional weak point. Every day of construction weakens the barriers further. Very good, Blackbeard applauded mockingly. The little archaeologist's memories serve you well. Yes, this bridge is being built directly over a dimensional rift, and when it's completed, when the final supports are put in place, the barriers will collapse entirely, Naruto finished, horror dawning in his voice. You're trying to merge our worlds. Not merge, Blackbeard corrected. Consume, you see, I've learned something interesting about these dimensional echoes we all carry. They're not random, they're connected to a source of power that exists between worlds. And whoever controls that source controls both dimensions, Neji said grimly, his Byakugan revealing the massive amounts of unstable energy gathering around them. The water beneath their boat began to churn as dimensional forces pressed against the weakening barriers between worlds. In the distance, Naruto could see the partially completed bridge, its metal framework gleaming ominously in the mist. So what's it going to be? Blackbeard asked, his multiple pistols now visible at his belt. Are you going to try to stop me, or are you going to join me in claiming the power that's rightfully ours? Naruto felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. Around him, his teammates were preparing for battle, but he could sense their uncertainty. They were facing not just a powerful enemy, but the very force that had given them their inherited memories in the first place. This is what I warned you about, kid, Rayleigh's voice whispered in his mind. Power without purpose, strength without bonds. Teach always believed that might makes right, that the strong should take whatever they wanted. What do I do? Naruto thought back desperately. How do we fight someone who has the same source of power we do? The same way we always did, Rayleigh replied with gentle certainty. Together. Teach's greatest weakness was his inability to truly trust anyone. He saw allies as tools, bonds as weaknesses. Show him what real strength looks like. Naruto stood slowly, his young frame somehow carrying the presence of a king. Around him, his teammates straightened, drawn by the quiet authority in his posture. You're wrong about one thing, teach, Naruto said, his voice carrying across the water with perfect clarity. The power we inherited isn't about taking what we want, it's about protecting what matters. He extended his hand toward his teammates, and one by one, they joined him. Sasuke's perfect swordsmanship, Neji's earth-hawking strength, Sakura's brilliant analytical mind, all united by bonds that transcended dimensional barriers. Zehahaha, Blackbeard laughed, but there was a note of uncertainty in it now. Pretty words, kid, let's see how they hold up against the power of darkness itself. The battle for the land of waves and potentially both dimensions was about to begin. But as power crackled through the air and the very fabric of reality groaned under the strain of colliding worlds, Naruto felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Because for the first time since inheriting Rayleigh's memories, he truly understood what it meant to be a king. It wasn't about ruling others, it was about inspiring them to become the best versions of themselves. And that was a power no amount of darkness could ever consume. The first exchange happened faster than thought. Blackbeard's hand moved toward his pistols just as Sasuke's katana cleared its sheath in a perfect Iaido draw. But instead of the clash of steel and gunpowder that should have followed, both fighters found themselves locked in place by an invisible force. Enough, Naruto said quietly, his conqueror's haki pressing down on the entire area like a physical weight. The water around their boat went perfectly still, the mist hung motionless in the air, and even Blackbeard's characteristic laugh died in his throat. But the pause lasted only a moment. With a roar of defiance, Blackbeard's own haki erupted outward, dark and consuming like a miniature black hole. The two forces met in the space between them, creating a pressure wave that sent ripples across the water in perfect concentric circles. Zehahaha, that's more like it. Blackbeard's grin stretched wider as he broke free from Naruto's influence. But you're still just a child playing with a king's power. Kuruzu. Darkness exploded from Blackbeard's position, reaching out with invisible tendrils that sought to drag everything into an inescapable void. Tazuna screamed as the pull nearly yanked him from the boat, while Kakashi grabbed the old man and channeled chakra through his feet to anchor them both. But Naruto was ready. In his mind, Rayleigh's memories provided perfect clarity about Blackbeard's abilities, the Yami Yami no Mi's power to negate other devil fruits, to pull opponents toward him, to consume light itself. Neji. Now, understanding flashed in Neji's eyes. His hands moved in seals that belonged to no Hyuga technique, and the very air around them began to vibrate. Kaishin, the space between them cracked like glass. Not a physical attack, but a disruption of the dimensional fabric itself. Whitebeard's earthquake power turned against the source of Blackbeard's darkness. The two forces collided in a spectacular display of dimensional physics gone wrong, creating a brief window of opportunity. Sasuke moved like liquid lightning, his form blurring as he closed the distance to Blackbeard. But this wasn't the wild aggression of an angry child, this was Mihawk's perfect sword technique channeled through Uchiha precision. Tsubeim Gishi, 3 simultaneous slashes that shouldn't have been physically possible, each one aimed at a different vital point. But Blackbeard was already moving, his stolen body flowing like water as he avoided the impossible strikes by mere inches. You'll have to do better than that, Blackbeard snarled, drawing 2 flintlocks and firing in the same motion. The bullets should have found their mark, but Naruto was already there, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had spent decades fighting impossible odds. His hands moved in patterns that belonged to no ninja art, blocking, redirecting, turning the enemy's momentum against them. Ryu Jujutsu, Rayleigh's voice whispered in his memory. Not just swordsmanship, but the art of controlling flow itself. Every attack has a current, learn to read it, and you can redirect rivers. The redirected bullets sparked off Sasuke's blade as he spun past, while Neji's follow-up earthquake sent a controlled shockwave through the water that lifted Blackbeard into the air. For a moment, it seemed like they had the advantage, but then Blackbeard's grin returned and Naruto felt his blood turn to ice. You think you understand power? Blackbeard laughed as he hung suspended above the churning water. You think these borrowed memories make you strong? Let me show you what real darkness looks like. The change was instantaneous and horrifying. Blackbeard's stolen body began to shift and expand, dark energy pouring from him like smoke. But more than that, Naruto could see other shapes moving within the darkness, ghostly figures that looked suspiciously familiar. That's impossible, Sakura breathed, her analytical mind racing. He's not just using Blackbeard's power, he's channeling multiple people at once. She was right. Within the writhing darkness, Naruto could make out the shapes of other legendary figures from the pirate world, Rocks D. Zebek, Captain John, even what looked like fragments of Whitebeard himself. The dimensional rift, Haku said suddenly, understanding dawning in their voice. He's not just possessing one person's memories, he's consuming them from the source, Zehahaha. Finally, someone who understands. The voice that emerged from the writhing mass of darkness was no longer just Blackbeard's. It was a chorus of the dead, dozens of legendary pirates speaking in unison. Every soul that passes through the dimensional barrier I can claim, every memory, every power, every technique. Zabuza stepped forward, his massive sword gleaming in the strange light. Not if I stop you first, his voice carried grim determination. I won't let Blackbeard's madness consume my world. But as he moved to attack, something unexpected happened. The fragmented memories he carried, Blackbeard's own experiences, began to resonate with the entity before them. Zabuza staggered, clutching his head as conflicting loyalties tore at his consciousness. Yes, the chorus of voices laughed triumphantly. You carry part of me already. Come home, my other self. Join the feast. No, Naruto said firmly, stepping between Zabuza and the entity. He's not yours anymore. Naruto's conqueror's Haki flared again, but this time it was different, more focused, more precise. Instead of trying to dominate through force, he was projecting something else. Acceptance, understanding, the quiet strength that came from choosing your own path. The effect on Zabuza was immediate. The conflict in his eyes settled, replaced by grim determination. You're right, kid. I may carry his memories, but I choose my own actions. Touching, the entity sneered, but ultimately pointless. You cannot fight what you are. The darkness surged forward like a tidal wave, but this time Team 7 was ready. They moved as one unit, their individual abilities combining in ways that should have been impossible. Sakura's analytical mind, enhanced by Robin's archaeological knowledge, identified the weak points in the entity's form. The dimensional anchor points, she called out. There, where the light bends strangely, Neji's Byakugan locked onto the targets she'd identified, while his inherited earthquake power created precise vibrations that disrupted the entity's cohesion. I can see them, but they're heavily defended. Leave that to me, Sasuke said, his sharingan spinning as it tracked the movement patterns within the darkness. His blade moved in impossible arcs, each strike perfectly timed to exploit the momentary gaps Neji's attacks created. But it was Naruto who delivered the decisive blow, not through force, but through understanding. You're afraid, he said, his voice carrying across the battle with perfect clarity. All of you, every soul you've consumed. You're afraid of being forgotten, of having your legacy fade away. That's why you're trying to merge the worlds. The entity's attack faltered slightly. What would you know about legacy, child? Everything, Naruto replied, his young voice carrying the weight of Rayleigh's accumulated wisdom. Because I carry the memory of someone who understood what legacy really means. He closed his eyes and reached deep into Rayleigh's memories, not for techniques or power, but for understanding. Images flashed through his mind. Roger's execution, the disbanding of the crew, the long years of waiting and watching as a new generation of pirates found their own paths to freedom. Legacy isn't about consuming others, Naruto said, opening eyes that now held depths beyond his years. It's about inspiring them to become something greater than you ever were. The darkness writhed, and for a moment the individual voices within it became distinct again, dozens of legendary pirates all speaking at once in confusion and conflict. The boy, he sounds like, Roger would have said something similar. What are we doing? This isn't what we fought for. Silence, Blackbeard's voice roared above the others. I am the darkness that consumes all. I am the end of stories. No, Naruto said simply. You're just afraid that yours isn't good enough. And then he did something that none of them expected. He stepped forward directly into the writhing mass of darkness. Naruto, Sakura screamed, but he was already gone, swallowed by the entity's form. Inside the darkness, Naruto found himself standing in a vast space filled with ghostly figures, the accumulated souls that Blackbeard had been consuming. They turned toward him with expressions of hope and desperation. You carry Rayleigh's light, one of them whispered, Roger himself, his grin sad but genuine. We've been waiting for someone who could remind us what we were fighting for. This isn't the legacy we wanted, another voice added, Whitebeard, his massive form dwarfing the others. We wanted our will to inspire the next generation, not consume them. Naruto nodded, understanding flooding through him. Then let's give them what they really need. He reached out with his conqueror's Haki, but instead of trying to dominate, he offered something else: choice. The freedom to let go, to trust that their stories would live on in better ways. One by one, the consumed souls began to fade, their energy not destroyed but transformed, released back into the dimensional flow where it could find new hosts naturally, without force or corruption. Blackbeard's voice rose in fury as his stolen power began to unravel. "No, I will not be forgotten. I will not fade into nothing." "You won't be forgotten," Naruto said gently, even as the last of the consumed souls disappeared. "But you can't force people to remember you. Legacy has to be earned." The entity's form collapsed inward, the stolen body of Gato falling to the water's surface like a discarded puppet. For a moment, Naruto thought it was over. But then the water around them began to churn more violently, and he realized the truth. The dimensional rift was still there, still unstable, and Blackbeard's presence had been the only thing keeping it partially controlled. "The bridge," Tazuna shouted over the growing roar of dimensional forces. "If we don't complete it, if we don't stabilize the rift, both worlds will be destroyed," Sakura finished, her enhanced analytical abilities working through the implications at lightning speed. Kakashi, who had been surprisingly quiet during the entire battle, finally spoke up. "There might be another way," he said, his visible eye focused on something in the distance. "But it would require a sacrifice." They all turned to look where he was pointing, and Naruto felt his heart sink. The partially completed bridge stretched across the water like a metal skeleton, its incomplete spans reaching toward each other but not quite touching. The dimensional rift was visible now as a writhing tear in the air above the construction site. "Someone would have to go into the rift," Kakashi continued grimly, "use their connection to both dimensions to stabilize it from within. But doing so would mean being trapped between worlds forever," Neji finished, his Byakugan allowing him to see the dimensional currents more clearly than the others. The boat fell silent except for the sound of increasingly violent water. Around them, reality itself seemed to be coming apart at the seams as the uncontrolled rift grew larger. "I'll do it," Naruto said without hesitation. "No," Sasuke said immediately. "If anyone should, I'll do it," Zabuza interrupted, his voice carrying final determination. "I started this mess by carrying Blackbeard's memories. I should be the one to end it." "None of you have to do it," came a new voice from the water nearby. They turned to see Haku walking across the surface toward them, but something was different about them now. The delicate features held a strength that hadn't been there before, and their eyes glowed with power that seemed to come from within. "The memories I inherited," Haku continued, stepping into their boat with fluid grace. "They weren't just from Vivi. They were from someone else too, someone who understood dimensional barriers better than anyone." "Who?" Naruto asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. "Nico Robin," Haku replied with a sad smile. "The real one, from the original world. She learned the truth about the dimensional rifts in her final years, discovered that they could be stabilized through a combination of will and sacrifice." Haku's form began to glow with soft blue light as they prepared to make their own sacrifice. "But there's something else you should know. This isn't the only rift. There are others scattered across both worlds, and they're all connected." "Connected how?" Sakura demanded, her analytical mind racing. "Like a web," Haku explained, their form becoming increasingly translucent. "And this one is just the beginning. Others will appear, some in your world, some in the original pirate world. And each time they do, people will be chosen to inherit the memories of those who came before." "Why?" Naruto asked desperately. "What's the point?" Haku smiled, and for a moment they looked exactly like Zabuza remembered from their youth, innocent and hopeful despite everything they'd endured. "Because both worlds are going to need protectors," they said simply. "And the only way to prepare for what's coming is to make sure the next generation has the strength and wisdom of those who came before." Before anyone could stop them, Haku leaped from the boat toward the dimensional rift. Their form dissolved into pure energy as they reached it, and for a moment the entire area was bathed in brilliant blue light. When it faded, the rift was gone, sealed by Haku's willing sacrifice. But their final words echoed across the water, carried by winds that seemed to come from between dimensions. "The real adventure is just beginning. Find the others, protect both worlds. And remember, the greatest treasure is the bonds you forge along the way." As their boat drifted toward the now safe land of waves, Team 7 sat in stunned silence, processing everything that had happened. They had won this battle, but at a cost that none of them had expected to pay. "Haku," Zabuza's voice was barely a whisper, filled with grief and pride in equal measure. But Naruto felt something else stirring in his consciousness, not sadness but determination. If Haku was right, if there were other rifts appearing, other people being chosen to inherit dimensional memories, then this was just the beginning. "You understand now, don't you, kid?" Rayleigh's voice was gentle in his mind. "This isn't about replacing your world with ours. It's about making sure both have a future worth protecting." As the land of waves grew larger ahead of them, Naruto made another silent promise. He would find the others Haku had mentioned. He would help them understand their inherited memories without losing themselves. And he would make sure that Haku's sacrifice meant something. Because that's what it meant to carry a king's burden, not to rule others, but to protect the future they deserved. The first battle was over, but the war for both dimensions had only just begun. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at the Land of Waves, and Naruto found himself staring at his reflection in the Hokage Tower's bathroom mirror, trying to reconcile the boy he saw with the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. The face looking back at him was still 12 years old, still bore the whisker marks that marked him as the Ninetales Jinchuriki, but his eyes held depths that belonged to someone who had lived through decades of triumph and tragedy. "You're brooding again, kid," Rayleigh's voice observed with gentle amusement. "That's more my style than yours." "I can't help it," Naruto thought back. "Every night I dream of other rifts opening, other people struggling with memories that don't belong to them. Haku died to seal one rift, but you said there would be more, and there will be, but that doesn't mean you have to carry the weight of both worlds on your shoulders alone." A knock on the bathroom door interrupted his internal dialogue. "Naruto," Sakura's voice carried a note of concern. "The Hokage is ready for us." Naruto splashed cold water on his face one more time and opened the door to find his pink-haired teammate waiting in the hallway. Like him, she looked older than her years. The analytical brilliance inherited from Nico Robin had sharpened her features, given her a calculating gaze that could be unsettling when she forgot to hide it. "Any word from the other villages?" Naruto asked as they walked toward the Hokage's office. "3 confirmed rifts," Sakura replied, her voice taking on the clinical tone she used when discussing her research. "One near the Hidden Sand Village, one in the Land of Lightning, and," she paused, her expression growing troubled, "one in Orochimaru's territory." Naruto felt his blood chill. If dimensional rifts were appearing in areas controlled by dangerous individuals, the implications were terrifying. What kind of people are being affected? That's what we're about to find out. They entered the Hokage's office to find it more crowded than usual. Hiruzen sat behind his desk, looking every one of his advanced years, while Jiraiya lounged against the wall with an expression of barely contained worry. But it was the 3 additional figures that made Naruto's inherited awareness prickle with recognition. The first was a girl about their age with short blonde hair and blue eyes that held the same haunted depth Naruto had grown accustomed to seeing in dimensional inheritors. She wore the headband of the Hidden Sand Village, but her posture carried the confident authority of someone used to command. The second figure was older, a young man in his late teens with spiky orange hair and multiple piercings. His eyes held a weight of suffering that made even Naruto's inherited memories of loss seem trivial by comparison. The third was the most disturbing, a pale boy who couldn't have been more than 10, with white hair and red markings under his eyes. But it wasn't his appearance that set Naruto on edge, it was the way reality seemed to bend slightly around him, as if the fundamental laws of nature were suggestions rather than rules. "Naruto, Sakura," Hiruzen said as they took their seats, "I'd like you to meet our guests, Temari of the Hidden Sand, Nagato of the former Hidden Rain, and," he paused as if the name itself carried weight, "Kimimaro of the Sound Village." "Careful, kid," Rayleigh's voice whispered with uncharacteristic urgency. "These 3, their inherited memories come from some of the most dangerous individuals I ever encountered." "Let me guess," Naruto said, his voice carefully neutral. "Dimensional inheritors?" Temari nodded grimly. "I've been having dreams of commanding fleets of ships, of strategic battles across impossible distances. The memories call themselves." She hesitated, as if saying the name might summon something unwanted. "Sengoku the Buddha." The fleet admiral, Naruto realized with growing concern. Sengoku had been one of the most tactically brilliant minds in the Marine Corps, a man who could orchestrate battles involving thousands of combatants with chess-like precision. "And you?" Sakura asked, turning to Nagato. The orange-haired young man's expression darkened. Pain, he said simply. The memories of someone who believed that only through suffering could the world achieve true peace. Someone who, his voice caught slightly, who destroyed entire islands to prove a point. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. In Rayleigh's memories, Pain had been a figure of legend and terror, a being of such overwhelming power that even the Yonko avoided direct confrontation with him. I carry the memories of Enel, Kimimaro said, his child's voice carrying undertones that made everyone in the room unconsciously lean away from him. A god who commanded lightning itself, who believed that mortals existed only to serve divine will. Three of the most dangerous philosophies from our world. Rayleigh's voice was grim. Absolute justice, peace through destruction, and divine supremacy, if those memories take root in the wrong minds. Which brings us to why you're all here, Jiroya said, pushing off from the wall with his characteristic casual manner that didn't quite hide his tension. The rifts aren't random, they're appearing in specific locations, affecting specific types of people. What do you mean? Naruto asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. Every confirmed inheritor has one thing in common, Hiruzen explained. They all possess what our world would classify as exceptional chakra capacity and unusual psychological profiles. More importantly, they're all individuals who were already isolated from their communities in some way. Temari snorted. In other words, we were all outsiders to begin with. Perfect targets for dimensional parasites. They're not parasites, Naruto said firmly, causing everyone to look at him in surprise. The memories, they're not trying to replace us. They're trying to guide us. Guide us toward what? Nagato asked, his ringed eyes boring into Naruto with uncomfortable intensity. Before Naruto could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Red lights flashed as ANBU operatives appeared in the windows, their masked faces turned toward something happening outside. What's the situation? Hiruzen demanded as one of the ANBU dropped through the window. Hokage-sama, the masked operative reported, we have a code black situation in the Forest of Death. Dimensional energy readings are off the charts and there are reports of, he paused as if struggling to believe his own words, reality distortions around the central tower. Another rift, Rayleigh's voice was grim. And this one's opening right here in Konoha. Everyone suit up, Hiruzen commanded, rising from his desk with more energy than he'd shown in years. If we're dealing with an uncontrolled dimensional rift in the middle of the village, we need all available power focused on containment. As they prepared to leave, Naruto caught Sasuke's eye from across the room. His teammate had been unusually quiet during the briefing, but now Naruto could see the internal struggle playing out on his face, Mihawk's memories warring with Uchiha pride and genuine concern for their village. You feel it too, don't you? Sasuke asked quietly as they prepared their equipment. Something's different about this rift. Naruto nodded. His enhanced perception was picking up energy signatures that felt familiar but wrong, like echoes of people he should recognize but couldn't quite place. The others, Neji said, joining their conversation, the new inheritors, their presence is amplifying whatever's happening. He was right. Naruto could sense it now. The interaction between different sets of inherited memories was creating some kind of resonance effect, like tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency. We need to be careful, Sakura added, her analytical mind working through the implications. If multiple dimensional inheritances are interacting, there's no telling what kind of chain reaction we might be dealing with. As they left the Hokage Tower and moved toward the Forest of Death, Naruto noticed that the very air seemed charged with potential. Street lamps flickered as they passed, and he could swear he saw ghostly figures moving in his peripheral vision, shadows of people who had never existed in this world. Kid, Rayleigh's voice was unusually serious. Whatever's happening here, it's bigger than just a dimensional rift. I can feel presence, multiple presences, all connected to our world but changed by their passage through the barriers. What kind of presences? Naruto thought back, but he already suspected the answer would be something he didn't want to hear. The kind that were too powerful to be contained by normal dimensional inheritance. The kind that might have found a way to manifest physically rather than just as memories. They reached the edge of the Forest of Death to find it transformed. The massive trees that normally blocked out the sky were twisted into impossible geometries, their branches reaching in directions that hurt to look at. Above the canopy, a tier in reality itself pulsed with dark energy. But it was what stood beneath the rift that made Naruto's blood turn to ice. Three figures waited in the clearing, each one radiating the kind of presence that made the air itself seem heavier. They weren't quite solid, their forms flickered between physical substance and dimensional energy, but their identities were unmistakable. The first was a massive man with a distinctive mustache and admiral's coat, his very presence radiating absolute justice and unwavering determination. Sengoku the Buddha, but not as Temuri's inherited memories. This was something far more complete, far more dangerous. The second figure was tall and imposing, with slick back hair and an expression of casual cruelty that made even experienced Jonin step back involuntarily. Pain, but not the fragmented memories that Nagato carried. This was the actual consciousness of one of the most feared beings from the pirate world. The third figure was the most unsettling, a being of pure electrical energy that vaguely maintained human shape, with an aura of divine arrogance that made reality bend around him. Enel, the self-proclaimed god of lightning, manifested not as memory but as something approaching his original power. "This is impossible," Rayleigh's voice was filled with shock and horror. "They're not just memories anymore, they're actual manifestations, pulled through the dimensional barriers by the resonance effect." Well, Sengoku's voice boomed across the clearing with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding fleets. "What have we here? Children playing with power they don't understand." More than that, Pain's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "These are the vessels that have been carrying fragments of our will." "How convenient." "Indeed," Enel's voice crackled with electrical energy. "It seems the mortals of this dimension have been preparing suitable bodies for our return." The implications hit Naruto like a physical blow. These weren't just memories or inherited personalities, they were the actual consciousnesses of legendary figures, somehow pulled into physical manifestation by the interaction of multiple dimensional inheritors. And they were looking at the assembled ninja like predators evaluating prey. "Everyone stay calm," Hiruzen commanded, but Naruto could hear the uncertainty in the old Hokage's voice. "We don't know their intentions yet." "Oh, but we do," Sengoku replied with a smile that held no warmth. "We intend to reclaim what belongs to us, starting with the power that's been scattered among these children." Pain stepped forward, and with each footstep, small cracks appeared in the ground. "This world has been touched by our influence, shaped by our will. It's only natural that we should rule it." "Rule?" Naruto found his voice, though it came out smaller than he'd intended. "You're not kings." "You're just what, boy?" Enel interrupted, electricity arcing between his fingers. "Gods who have transcended the boundaries of death itself." "This is bad, kid," Rayleigh's voice was urgent. "They're not fully manifested yet, they're still drawing power from the dimensional rift if we can disrupt the connection." But before Naruto could act on that information, Sasuke stepped forward, his hand moving to his katana with the fluid precision that marked him as Mihawk's inheritor. "You want to rule this world?" Sasuke's voice carried a deadly calm that made everyone present tense. "You'll have to go through us first." The three manifestations laughed in unison, and the sound was like reality itself cracking under pressure. "Children," Sengoku said with condescending amusement, "you carry fragments of our memories. Do you really think you can stand against the originals?" "Let's find out," Naruto replied, feeling Rayleigh's determination merge with his own. Around him, his allies prepared for battle, not just Team 7, but the dimensional inheritors from other villages, all united by the common threat. As power began to build on both sides, the dimensional rift above them pulsed with increasingly violent energy. Whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of Konoha, but potentially both dimensions. The weight of kings had never felt so heavy. But as Naruto looked at his friends, teammates who had become family, allies who had chosen to stand together despite their fears, he realized something important. He wasn't carrying that weight alone, and that made all the difference. The first clash shattered the laws of physics. Sasuke's blade met Sengoku's golden fist in a collision that sent shockwaves rippling through both dimensions. For a moment, the Uchiha's inherited swordsmanship held against the fleet admiral's overwhelming power, but the strain was visible on his young face. "Impressive," Sengoku acknowledged, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "But you're wielding a fragment against the whole." He pressed forward, his Buddha form beginning to manifest as golden light that made reality bend around him. Sasuke was forced back, his feet carving trenches in the ground as he struggled to maintain his defense. "Sasuke," Naruto moved to help, but found his path blocked by crackling electricity. "Your opponent is me, boy," Enel's voice resonated with divine arrogance. "Let me show you the difference between a pretender and a true god." Lightning erupted from the self-proclaimed deity's form, not the controlled chakra-based techniques of this world, but the pure elemental fury of natural storm systems. Naruto barely managed to dodge as bolts of electricity turned the ground where he'd been standing into molten glass. His power is too raw, too unfocused. Rayleigh's voice provided analysis even as Naruto moved. He relies on overwhelming force rather than technique. Use that against him. Naruto's enhanced perception, trained by months of integrating Rayleigh's memories, allowed him to read the patterns in Enel's attacks. The lightning was devastating but predictable, the mark of someone who had never faced an opponent who could challenge his power. Observation Haki, Naruto whispered, feeling his consciousness expand to encompass the entire battlefield. The change was immediate. Time seemed to slow as Naruto read the intent behind each attack, the micro-expressions that preceded each movement. He flowed between lightning strikes like water, each dodge perfectly timed to waste Enel's energy while conserving his own. Impossible, Enel's composure cracked slightly. You're just a mortal child. Maybe, Naruto replied, his voice carrying Rayleigh's patient wisdom, but I learned from someone who understood that true power comes from humility, not arrogance. Meanwhile, Neji faced Pain in a battle that threatened to tear the forest apart. Each of Pain's attacks carried the force of absolute destruction, gravitational pulls that crushed trees into splinters, repulsive forces that sent boulders flying like pebbles. But Neji had inherited more than just Whitebeard's power, he'd inherited his protective instincts. Every attack he made was calculated not just to damage his opponent, but to shield his allies from collateral damage. You fight to protect, Pain observed, his voice carrying notes of curiosity and disdain. How quaint. In my world, such sentimentality was a weakness to be exploited. In mine, Neji replied, his Byakugan tracking the dimensional distortions around Pain's attacks. It's what makes us strong. His hands moved in the complex patterns of the 8 trigrams, but infused with Whitebeard's earthquake power. Instead of the traditional 64 palm strikes, each blow carried enough force to crack the dimensional barriers themselves. Pain staggered under the assault, his manifestation flickering as the combination of precise Hyuga technique and overwhelming destructive force disrupted his connection to the rift. Interesting, he admitted, raising his hand to deflect another strike. Perhaps this world has produced something worth preserving after all, but it was Sakura who provided the breakthrough that changed the tide of battle. Her analytical mind, enhanced by Robin's archaeological expertise, had been studying the dimensional rift throughout the fight. The manifestations aren't stable, she called out over the sound of clashing powers. They're drawing energy from the rift, but the connection is fluctuating based on emotional resonance. Of course, Rayleigh's voice carried sudden understanding. They're not truly alive, they're echoes given form by the memories their inheritors carry. Disrupt the emotional connection. We need to reject them, Naruto said, sudden clarity filling his voice. Not fight them, reject the parts of their personalities that don't belong in this world. What are you talking about? Temari shouted as she dodged another of Sengoku's attacks. The Sand Kunoichi had been trying to match his tactical brilliance with inherited strategic knowledge, but she was clearly outmatched. The memories we inherited, Naruto explained, even as he continued his dance with Enel's lightning. They're not just knowledge and power, they're pieces of personality, fragments of will, but we get to choose which parts we accept. Understanding dawned in Sasuke's eyes. Instead of trying to match Sengoku's overwhelming power, he began to focus on the differences between himself and Mihawk's memories. The loneliness, the pride, the belief that strength meant standing alone, all the aspects of the world's strongest swordsman that didn't align with who Sasuke chose to be. The effect was immediate. Sengoku's manifestation flickered, his golden form becoming translucent as the emotional anchor connecting him to this dimension weakened. What are you doing? Sengoku demanded, but his voice carried less authority now. Choosing my own path, Sasuke replied, his katana moving in patterns that were neither pure Mihawk technique nor traditional Uchiha style, but something uniquely his own. One by one, the other inheritors followed suit. Neji rejected Whitebeard's tendency toward absolute protection in favor of his own desire to protect through understanding. Temari chose tactical flexibility over Sengoku's rigid adherence to absolute justice. Most importantly, Nagato stepped forward, his Rinnegan eyes blazing with determination. I've carried Pain's memories for months, he said, his young voice carrying weight beyond his years. I've felt his despair, his certainty that only through suffering could peace be achieved, but I reject that philosophy. He raised his hands, and for a moment the gravitational forces that Pain commanded turned against the manifestation itself. True peace, Nagato continued, doesn't come from forcing others to submit. It comes from understanding, from choosing to work together despite our differences. Pain's manifestation staggered, his form becoming increasingly unstable. You would reject power, reject the certainty of absolute control? Yes, Nagato said simply, because that's not the kind of peace worth having. The manifestation of Pain began to dissolve, his form breaking apart into fragments of dimensional energy that scattered harmlessly into the air. Following his example, the other manifestations began to destabilize as their inheritors continued to assert their own personalities over the inherited memories. But Enel wasn't going down without a fight. You think you can dismiss a god so easily? Lightning erupted from his form in all directions, no longer controlled or targeted but pure destructive fury. If I cannot rule this world, then I'll destroy it. The attack was so overwhelming that even Naruto's enhanced perception couldn't find a path through it. For a moment, it seemed like Enel's final tantrum would succeed in killing everyone present. Then Kimimaro stepped forward. The pale boy had been silent throughout most of the battle, but now he raised one small hand toward the chaotic lightning. His inherited memories of Enel's power allowed him to understand the electrical patterns, to see the underlying structure beneath the apparent chaos. You're not a god, Kimimaro said quietly, his child's voice somehow carrying across the electrical storm. You never were, you were just afraid of being ordinary, afraid of being forgotten. The lightning paused, as if responding to the unexpected compassion in the boy's voice. I understand that fear, Kimimaro continued. I've been dying since I was born, told I was special, told I was chosen. But being special doesn't make you a god, it just makes you responsible for using your gifts wisely. Enel's manifestation began to shrink, the wild electrical energy condensing back into a more stable form. For a moment, his expression was almost human, confused, lost, like a child who had been playing pretend for so long he'd forgotten what was real. I just wanted to matter. Enel's voice was smaller now, less divine and more desperately human. You do matter, Kimimaro replied gently, but not because you're above others, because you're part of something larger than yourself. The manifestation of Enel dissolved peacefully, his energy joining the others in returning to the dimensional flow. But instead of scattering randomly, the released energy seemed to be drawn toward something or someone. Naruto felt it first, a sensation like warm sunlight filling his consciousness. But this wasn't just Rayleigh's memories, this was something new, something that belonged entirely to this world and this moment. Well done, kid, Rayleigh's voice was filled with pride and something else, a sense of completion, of a job well finished. You've learned the most important lesson of all. What's that? Naruto thought back, though he suspected he already knew the answer. That true kings don't rule others, they inspire others to become kings themselves. Around the clearing, the other inheritors were experiencing similar sensations. The foreign memories they'd carried were still there, but transformed, no longer intrusive echoes of someone else's life, but integrated wisdom that enhanced rather than replaced their own personalities. It's over, Hiruzen said, his aged voice carrying relief and wonder. Above them, the dimensional rift was closing, its violent energy calming into a stable portal that would soon fade entirely. No, Naruto said quietly, looking around at his friends and allies, people who had chosen to stand together despite their fears, who had rejected the easy path of inherited power in favor of the harder road of earned wisdom. It's just beginning, he was right. As the dimensional energies settled and the manifestations faded, new possibilities opened up. The inheritors were still connected to each other, still linked by the shared experience of carrying memories from another world. But now that connection was a choice rather than a burden. So what happens now? Sakura asked, her analytical mind already working through the implications of what they'd experienced. Now we learn, Naruto replied, feeling more certain of himself than he had since this whole journey began. We train together, we share what we've inherited, and we make sure that the next time dimensional barriers weaken, we're ready to help whoever needs it. A network of guardians, Sasuke added, understanding dawning in his voice. Connected across village boundaries, united by shared purpose rather than political allegiance. The dimensional inheritance core, Neji suggested with a slight smile. Though we might want to work on the name. As they stood together in the clearing, watching the last traces of the dimensional rift fade into ordinary sky, Naruto felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with inherited memories. This was his choice, his path, his way of carrying the burden of kings, not by ruling others, but by helping them rule themselves. The weight of inherited power would always be there, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a gift, one that he was finally ready to share with the world. "Proud of you, kid." Rayleigh's voice was barely a whisper now, fading as the old pirate's consciousness finally found peace. "Now go show them what a real king looks like." As Team 7 and their new allies prepared to return to the village, Naruto looked up at the clear sky where the dimensional rift had been. Somewhere out there in the space between worlds, other rifts might be opening. Other people might be struggling with inherited memories and borrowed power, but they wouldn't face that struggle alone, not anymore. The network had been formed, the bonds had been forged, and the next generation of Guardians was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together. 6 months had passed since the dimensional rift incident in Konoha, and the world had begun to settle into its new reality. The Dimensional Inheritance Corps, as they'd eventually decided to call themselves, had grown from the original 5 members to nearly 30 inheritors scattered across all 5 major villages and several minor ones. Naruto sat in the newly constructed meeting hall deep beneath the Hokage monument, reviewing reports from their network's latest operations. The underground facility had been carved out specifically to house their growing organization, a neutral space that belonged to no single village but served all of them. "Anything interesting?" Sasuke asked, settling into the chair across from him. The Uchiha had changed over the past months, his inherited memories now fully integrated with his own personality. The result was someone who retained Mihawk's tactical brilliance and swordsmanship while embracing the bonds that Sasuke himself valued. 3 new manifestations in the past week, Naruto replied, sliding a report across the table. "One in the hidden cloud, one near the borders of the land of Earth, and," he paused, his expression growing troubled, "one in Otagakure." Sasuke's eyes sharpened. "Orochimaru's territory." "That's concerning." "It gets worse," Sakura said, entering the meeting room with Neji close behind. Her pink hair had grown longer over the months, and she now wore it in a style reminiscent of Robin's, though the analytical gleam in her eyes was entirely her own. "According to our contacts in the Sound Village, the manifestation wasn't random. It was deliberately summoned." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. In the months since the network's formation, they dealt with 17 different dimensional rifts, helping inheritors come to terms with their borrowed memories and preventing manifestations from destabilizing local reality. But all of those had been natural occurrences, spontaneous weakening of dimensional barriers. If someone had figured out how to artificially create rifts, who? Neji asked, his Byakugan unconsciously activating as he scanned the area for potential threats. His integration with Whitebeard's memories had given him an almost paternal protective instinct toward the other members. "That's what we need to find out," came a new voice from the entrance. They all turned to see Kakashi descending the stairs, but he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a figure that made Naruto's inherited awareness prickle with recognition and unease. The newcomer was tall and pale, with long black hair and golden, serpentine eyes that seemed to see too much. But it was the way reality seemed to bend slightly around him that marked him as something more than an ordinary ninja. "This is Kabuto Yakushi," Kakashi said, his visible eye never leaving the newcomer. "Former spy for Orochimaru, current defector according to his testimony." Kabuto's lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. "Let's just say I've had a change of perspective," he said, his voice carrying subtle harmonics that seemed to resonate with dimensional energy. "When you inherit the memories of someone like Doflamingo, your priorities tend to shift." Doflamingo. The name sent a chill down Naruto's spine. In Rayleigh's memories, the former celestial dragon had been one of the most dangerous individuals in the entire world, a master manipulator who had turned entire kingdoms into his personal playgrounds. "And you're here because?" Sasuke asked, his hand moving to rest casually on his katana's hilt. "Because my former master has been experimenting with dimensional rifts for months," Kabuto replied, settling uninvited into one of the empty chairs. "And his latest project involves creating artificial inheritors, people who receive not just memories but active consciousness transfers from the other dimension." The implications were staggering. Natural dimensional inheritance was challenging enough, requiring the inheritor to maintain their own identity while integrating foreign memories. But an active consciousness transfer would be tantamount to possession, the original personality completely overwritten by the transferred consciousness. That's monstrous, Sakura breathed, her analytical mind immediately grasping the ethical implications. Indeed, Kabuto agreed with another cold smile, but effective. Imagine an army of Orochimaru's followers, each one carrying the complete consciousness of a legendary figure from the pirate world. No integration period, no identity crisis, no possibility of rejection. An army of puppets, Neji said grimly. Precisely, and I'm afraid your organization has become something of an obstacle to his plans. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed as the emergency communication system activated, projecting a holographic image of Temuri's face into the center of the room. "Emergency alert to all core members," she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "We have multiple Class A dimensional disturbances manifesting simultaneously across the continent. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The hologram flickered as additional images appeared, real-time footage from various locations showing dimensional rifts tearing open with mechanical precision. Unlike the chaotic natural rifts they'd dealt with before, these were perfectly circular, stable, and clearly artificial. "How many?" Naruto asked, though he dreaded the answer. 17 confirmed, with more opening every minute, Temuri's voice carried across multiple time zones as reports flooded in. And they're not just randomly placed, they're positioned to create a geometric pattern across the continent. Sakura was already moving to the tactical display, her inherited knowledge allowing her to analyze the pattern with Robin's archaeological expertise combined with her own strategic mind. "It's a summoning circle," she said after a moment, her face pale with realization. "A continental-scale summoning circle designed to punch a hole between dimensions large enough to what?" Sasuke demanded. "To allow physical travel between worlds," Kabuto finished, his golden eyes gleaming with something that might have been admiration or horror. Orochimaru isn't just creating artificial inheritors anymore. He's trying to open a permanent gateway between dimensions. "This is bad, kid," Kurama's voice rumbled through Naruto's consciousness for the first time in months. The Nine Tails had been unusually quiet since Naruto's integration with Rayleigh's memories, but now the Great Fox's presence felt urgent. If he succeeds, if the barriers between worlds collapse entirely, both dimensions could be destroyed. Naruto finished the thought, feeling ice form in his veins. "We have to stop him," he said, standing with sudden determination. "All of us working together, against Orochimaru and an army of artificial inheritors." Kabuto's smile turned predatory. "How delightfully suicidal, though I suppose with Doflamingo's memories I do appreciate a good challenge." "You're with us then?" Sasuke asked, studying the former spy carefully. "My dear boy," Kabuto replied, his voice carrying Doflamingo's characteristic arrogance, "I wouldn't miss this for the world. After all, I have a very personal interest in seeing Orochimaru's plans fail." "Personal how?" Neji pressed. Kabuto's expression darkened. "Because his first successful artificial inheritor was meant to be me, and I have no intention of letting anyone, not even my former master, erase who I am." The holographic display updated again, showing the positions of all active core members across the continent. 32 inheritors scattered across multiple villages and territories, each one now a potential target for Orochimaru's forces. "We can't fight this defensively," Naruto said, his mind already working through tactical possibilities with Rayleigh's strategic knowledge. "If we try to protect each location individually, we'll be spread too thin." "Agreed," Sasuke nodded. "We need to strike at the source, find wherever Orochimaru is coordinating this operation and shut it down." "That would be the problem," Kabuto interjected smoothly. "My former master isn't operating from any single location. He's been using dimensional rifts for transportation, appearing wherever he's needed most." "Then we force him to come to us," Sakura said suddenly, her eyes bright with dangerous inspiration. "We give him a target too valuable to ignore." "What kind of target?" Neji asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. "Us," Naruto said simply, "all of us together in one place. If Orochimaru wants to create artificial inheritors, he'll need to neutralize the natural ones first." "A trap," Sasuke mused, "dangerous but potentially effective." "More than dangerous," Kabuto said with genuine concern. "Suicidal? You're talking about facing not just Orochimaru, but potentially dozens of artificial inheritors carrying the complete consciousness of legendary figures." Then we'd better make sure we're ready, Naruto replied, feeling Rayleigh's calm determination settle over him like a familiar cloak. Send the signal to all core members, full mobilization, emergency protocols, everyone who can travel converge on Konoha immediately. And those who can't, Sakura asked. They focus on evacuating civilians from the rift zones, Neji answered. If this turns into a dimensional war, we want as few innocent people in the crossfire as possible. As the emergency preparations began in earnest, Naruto found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, he'd been a confused boy struggling with inherited memories that didn't belong to him. Now he was helping coordinate a response to a threat that could potentially destroy 2 dimensions. You've grown up fast, kid, Rayleigh's voice was a gentle whisper in his consciousness. Faster than anyone should have to, but you're ready for this. Am I? Naruto thought back, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. What if I make the wrong choice? What if people die because of my decisions? Then you'll carry that weight just like every king before you. Rayleigh's voice was compassionate but firm. But you won't carry it alone. That's what you've built here, a family of kings, each one strong enough to share the burden. Looking around at his teammates and allies as they prepared for what might be their final battle, Naruto realized Rayleigh was right. They'd all changed over the past months, all grown into the power they'd inherited while maintaining the bonds that made them who they were. Sasuke had become a swordsman whose blade carried both Mihawk's precision and Uchiha pride. Sakura had evolved into a strategic mind that combined Robin's analytical brilliance with her own determination to protect those she cared about. Neji had grown into a protector whose strength rivaled Whitebeard's but whose wisdom came from his own experiences. And the others, Temari with her tactical genius, Kimimaro with his understanding of divine power tempered by human compassion, even Kabuto with his complex mix of loyalty and ambition. All of them had found ways to make inherited memories serve their own purposes rather than being enslaved by them. That's the real treasure, Rayleigh's voice carried warm approval. Not the power you've inherited, but the bonds you've forged while learning to use it. As reports continued to flood in from across the continent, as dimensional rifts multiplied and reality itself began to strain under the pressure of Orochimaru's artificial summoning circle, Naruto felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. This was what they'd been training for, what the network had been built to handle. They might be facing impossible odds, going up against an enemy who could potentially field an army of legendary consciousnesses, but they had something Orochimaru's artificial inheritors would never possess. They had chosen their own path. They had earned their power through struggle and growth and the conscious decision to remain true to themselves. And most importantly, they had each other. The storm was gathering, dimensional barriers were weakening, and the fate of 2 worlds hung in the balance. But they were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next, as kings should, as family must. The assembly hall beneath the Hokage monument had never held so many people, yet the silence was absolute. 32 dimensional inheritors from across the shinobi world sat in concentric circles, their combined presence creating an almost tangible weight in the air. Naruto stood at the center, looking out at faces that had become as familiar as family over the past months. Each person here carried the memories of legends, the weight of inherited power, and the conscious choice to use that power for protection rather than domination. The situation is worse than we initially thought, he began, his voice carrying the calm authority that had become second nature. Our intelligence suggests Orochimaru isn't just trying to open a permanent dimensional gateway. He's attempting to merge the fundamental laws of both worlds. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. Sakura stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the continental summoning circle in its full scope. Robin's archaeological knowledge combined with our current data suggests this pattern isn't just designed for transportation, she explained, her analytical mind working through implications that chilled everyone present. It's a dimensional fusion array. If activated at full power, it would overlay our world with the pirate dimension, creating a hybrid reality governed by the laws of both. What would that mean in practical terms? Asked Shino Aburame, one of the newer inheritors who carried fragments of Rob Lucci's memories. Chaos, Neji answered grimly. Devil fruits would begin manifesting naturally in our world, while our chakra system would bleed into theirs. The resulting instability could tear both dimensions apart. Kinkuro, whose inherited memories came from Frankie the cyborg shipwright, raised his hand. Can we disrupt the array, hit the key points simultaneously? That's what Orochimaru expects us to do, Kabuto interjected from his position near the outer circle. His golden eyes gleamed with Doflamingo's tactical cunning. He's positioned artificial inheritors at each rift point specifically to counter our network's usual strategies. Temari frowned. How many artificial inheritors are we talking about? At least 50 confirmed, Kabuto replied. Each one carrying the complete consciousness of a significant figure from the pirate world. No identity integration, no moral constraints, no possibility of redemption. They are what they carry, nothing more. The weight of those numbers settled over the assembly like a burial shroud. 50 artificial inheritors against 32 natural ones, and that was assuming they could even reach the primary staging areas. There's something else, Kabuto continued, his voice taking on a note of genuine concern. My former master has been particularly interested in creating counters to specific members of your organization. Counters how? Sasuke asked, his hand unconsciously moving to his katana. He's analyzed the fighting styles and psychological profiles of your core group, Kabuto explained. The artificial inheritors stationed at the most critical rift points aren't random, they're specifically chosen to exploit your individual weaknesses. Naruto felt ice form in his veins. You're saying he's built an entire army designed specifically to kill us? Not kill, Kabuto corrected with a cold smile. Capture. You see, Orochimaru has discovered something interesting about natural dimensional inheritors. Your consciousness carries traces of the original dimension, traces that could be extracted and used to stabilize his fusion array. The implications were staggering. Not only were they facing impossible odds, but their very presence at the battle would potentially make Orochimaru's plan more likely to succeed. So we're damned if we fight and damned if we don't, muttered Kiba and Yuzuka, whose inherited memories came from Tony Chopper. Not necessarily, came a new voice from the entrance. Everyone turned to see Jiraiya descending the stairs, but he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a figure that made several of the inheritors gasp in recognition. An elderly woman with short gray hair and a medical coat, her presence radiating the kind of competence that came from decades of saving lives. This is Dr. Kureha, Jiraiya announced. She's unique among our network, the old woman snorted. I'm 139 years old, you fool, of course I'm unique. She looked around the assembly with sharp eyes that missed nothing. And before you ask, yes, I remember both lives. I was Dr. Kureha in the pirate world, and I'm Dr. Kureha in this one. Complete reincarnation, not just memory inheritance. The silence that followed was profound. A complete reincarnation, someone who had actually lived in both worlds, was unprecedented. How is that possible? Sakura asked, her scientific mind immediately fascinated. Because I died of old age in my original world, Kureha replied matter-of-factly. No trauma, no regrets, no unfinished business. My consciousness was ready to move on, so when the dimensional barriers weakened, I simply moved. That's incredible, Neji breathed. The strategic implications are exactly why I'm here, Kureha interrupted. I know both worlds intimately, understand how their laws interact, and more importantly, I know Orochimaru's plan has a fatal flaw. She moved to the holographic display, her aged fingers manipulating the controls with surprising dexterity. The continental summoning circle rotated, revealing hidden layers of complexity that hadn't been visible before. Your analysis is correct, she said to Sakura. This is indeed a dimensional fusion array. But Orochimaru has made a critical error in his calculations. What kind of error? Naruto asked, hope beginning to kindle in his chest. He's assuming that both dimensions have the same fundamental structure, Kureha explained. But they don't. The pirate world operates on a different set of physical laws that allowed for things like devil fruits, Haki, and sea kings. Our world operates on chakra-based physics. She highlighted specific points on the array. When he attempts fusion, the conflicting physical laws will create cascade failures at these intersections. The array won't merge the worlds, it will create a feedback loop that destroys both. So we stop him to save both dimensions, Sasuke said. That doesn't change the tactical situation. Actually, it does, Kureha replied with a grin that reminded Naruto uncomfortably of her younger self's manic expressions. Because I know exactly when and where the cascade failures will begin, and more importantly, I know how to weaponize them. She manipulated the display again, showing potential failure points spreading like cracks across the continental array. If we can trigger controlled failures at specific nodes, we can turn his own weapon against him. Instead of destroying both worlds, we destroy the array itself. And everyone standing on it, Kabuto pointed out. Everyone except natural dimensional inheritors, Kuraha corrected. Your hybrid nature, part original world, part pirate world, would actually protect you from the cascade effect. You'd survive while the artificial inheritors are torn apart by conflicting dimensional forces. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, but Naruto could see the problems immediately. We'd have to get close to the primary nodes. And if Orochimaru has positioned specific counters for each of us, then we give him exactly what he expects, Sasuke said slowly, understanding dawning in his voice. We walk into his trap, let him think he's winning, and then turn the tables at the last moment. A gambit, Neji agreed. Sacrifice apparent advantage to gain a hidden one. It's incredibly dangerous, Sakura pointed out. If we miscalculate the timing, if the cascade failures happen too early or too late, both worlds die anyway, Naruto finished, so we don't miscalculate. He looked around the assembly, meeting the eyes of each inheritor in turn. These weren't just allies, they were family, bound together by shared experience and conscious choice to use inherited power responsibly. I won't lie to you, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute honesty. This is probably a suicide mission. Even if the plan works perfectly, some of us might not make it back, and if it fails, we all die together, Kinkuro said with a shrug. Sounds about right for this group. Speak for yourself, Kiba muttered. I've got a dog to get home to. Despite the gravity of the situation, several people chuckled. It was a moment of humanity in the face of cosmic stakes, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. The question, Temari said seriously, is whether we can coordinate something this complex across multiple battle zones simultaneously. That's where I come in, Ino Yamanaka said, stepping forward. Her inherited memories came from Jewelry Bonnie, and over the months she developed techniques that combined mind-body jutsu with time distortion abilities. I can link our consciousness network temporarily, not enough to share thoughts, but enough to coordinate timing down to the microsecond. And I can handle the technical aspects, Shikamaru added. His inherited memories from Vegapunk had made him possibly the most brilliant tactical mind in any village. If Dr. Kuraha can provide the specifications for the cascade triggers, I can calculate optimal positioning and timing. One by one, the other inheritors began volunteering their specific abilities for the mission. Lee would use his inherited Luffy memories to provide mobility support. Hinata's combination of Byakugan and inherited Robin abilities would handle intelligence gathering. Even the newer members found roles that played to their unique combinations of inherited and natural abilities. There's one more thing, Kuraha said as the planning session reached its peak. Orochimaru isn't the only threat we're facing. The assembly fell quiet again, sensing that whatever she was about to reveal would change everything. The dimensional barriers have been weakening globally, she continued. Not just because of artificial rifts, but because the natural balance between worlds has been disrupted. Even if we stop Orochimaru, even if we destroy his array, the damage may already be done. Meaning, Naruto asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Meaning this might be our last chance to stabilize the barriers between dimensions, Kuraha replied grimly. If we fail, if the cascade effect spreads beyond the continental array, it could trigger a chain reaction that unravels reality itself. The weight of those words settled over the assembly like a physical presence. They weren't just fighting to stop a madman's plan, they were fighting for the continued existence of reality itself. No pressure, kid, Kurama's voice rumbled through Naruto's consciousness with dark humor. Just the fate of two dimensions, Naruto thought back, no big deal. You know what Roger used to say in situations like this? Rayleigh's voice was calm, reassuring. When the stakes are highest, that's when you find out what kind of person you really are. And what kind of person am I? The kind who doesn't give up no matter how impossible the odds. The kind who inspires others to be better than they thought they could be. The kind who carries a king's burden not because he has to, but because he chooses to. Looking around at the faces of his friends and allies, Naruto felt that familiar sense of determination settle over him. They were facing impossible odds, walking into a carefully prepared trap, betting both dimensions on a plan that required perfect execution with no room for error. It was exactly the kind of situation that separated true kings from pretenders. All right, he said, his voice carrying across the assembly with quiet authority. Let's go save reality. The response was immediate, 32 voices speaking in unison, not with inherited memories or borrowed power, but with their own conscious choice to stand together against the impossible. For both worlds, they said. For everyone we protect, they said. For the bonds that make us strong, they said. As they prepared to leave the safety of their underground haven and face the greatest threat either dimension had ever known, Naruto felt a moment of perfect clarity. This was what it meant to be a king, not to rule over others, but to inspire them to become heroes. And in that moment, he knew they would succeed, not because victory was guaranteed, but because they had chosen to face the impossible together. As family, as kings, as the guardians both worlds needed them to be. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of what had once been the Hidden Sound Village. Where Orochimaru's stronghold had stood, now only twisted metal and dimensional scars marked the landscape, evidence of the battle that would reshape both worlds. Naruto knelt beside a crater that still hummed with residual dimensional energy, his enhanced senses reading the lingering traces of the cascade failure they'd triggered 3 days ago. The plan had worked, mostly. The Continental Fusion Array was destroyed, the artificial inheritors were gone, and both dimensions remained intact. But the cost? 32 went in, he whispered to himself, the words tasting like ash. 28 came out, that's the burden of command, kid. Kurama's voice was gentler than usual. The Nine Tails had been unusually supportive since the battle, as if the fox finally understood what it meant to carry responsibility for others. You can't save everyone. But I should have been able to save them, Naruto thought back, his consciousness touching the empty spaces where 4 of his network members used to be. Kiba had thrown himself between an artificial Akainu and a group of evacuating civilians. Shino had held off 3 enemy inheritors long enough for others to reach their positions. 2 others had simply faded, their consciousness torn apart by the dimensional backlash they'd used to trigger the cascade failures. You're brooding again, Sakura said, approaching across the scarred ground. Her medical training had kept her busy over the past 3 days, treating survivors and documenting the effects of dimensional exposure. That's not like you, isn't it? Naruto replied, still staring into the crater. Rayleigh's memories are full of moments like this, standing over the graves of friends who died for someone else's dream. Sakura sat beside him, her presence a welcome anchor to the present. But that's not what this was, and you know it. They didn't die for your dream, they died for their own. They chose to be here, chose to fight, chose to sacrifice themselves for something bigger than any one person. Before Naruto could respond, the air around them began to shimmer. Not with the violent energy of a dimensional rift, but with something gentler, more like heat waves rising from summer pavement. What's happening? Sakura asked, her analytical mind immediately alert. I'm not sure, Naruto replied, but something in Rayleigh's memories stirred with recognition. It feels familiar but different, like the shimmering intensified and suddenly they weren't alone. Translucent figures began to appear around the crater, not solid but clearly visible. Naruto's breath caught as he recognized them. Kiba stood there, grinning his usual cocky grin, though his form flickered like candlelight. Beside him, Shino's insects formed temporary patterns in the air before dissolving. The other 2 lost members appeared as well, their forms more stable than Naruto had expected. How? Sakura began, but one of the figures held up a translucent hand. We're not ghosts, Kiba's voice carried across dimensions, somehow both distant and immediate. We're something else. The dimensional cascade didn't destroy us, it transformed us. Transformed you into what? Naruto asked, rising to his feet. Guardians of the barriers themselves, Shino replied, his usual emotionless tone carrying notes of wonder. We exist in the space between worlds now, able to monitor dimensional stability, prevent unauthorized crossings. The implications were staggering. Instead of dying, the 4 lost members had become something unprecedented, entities that existed between dimensions, capable of protecting both worlds from future threats. It's not permanent, one of the other figures added. We can choose to move on when we're ready, find whatever comes next, but for now, we're needed here. Does it hurt? Sakura asked, her medical training making her focus on their well-being even in death. No, Kiba replied with a laugh that echoed strangely. Actually, it's pretty amazing. We can see both worlds simultaneously, understand how they're connected, feel the flow of dimensional energy itself. More importantly, Shino added, we can communicate with other dimensional guardians. There are others like us scattered across both worlds, people who chose transformation over death when faced with dimensional forces. Naruto felt a chill of possibility. How many others? Dozens, came a new voice, and everyone turned to see another translucent figure materializing. This one was taller, older, with distinctive scars and a presence that made even Naruto's inherited awareness take notice. "Edward Newgate," the figure said with a grin that could have lit up the world. "Though I suppose in this form you can call me what I really am, a father watching over his children." Whitebeard himself, Naruto realized with shock. Not an inherited memory or artificial consciousness, but the actual soul of the man who had died at Marineford. "You're not the only ones who have been touched by dimensional forces," Whitebeard continued, his translucent form radiating the same protective warmth Naruto remembered from Neji's inherited memories. "The barriers between worlds have been thin for decades, we just never noticed because the crossings were so subtle." "How long have you been watching?" Sakura asked. "Since the first natural inheritor appeared," Whitebeard replied. "We've been guiding the process, making sure the right memories found the right people, making sure kids like you got the support you needed." The revelation was overwhelming. The dimensional inheritance network hadn't been an accident or a cosmic fluke. It had been carefully orchestrated by beings who existed between worlds, who understood better than anyone what it meant to carry inherited power responsibly. "Why didn't you tell us?" Naruto asked, though he wasn't sure if he felt betrayed or grateful. "Because you needed to choose your own path," came another familiar voice. Rayleigh's translucent form materialized beside Whitebeard, his gentle smile exactly as Naruto remembered it from borrowed memories. "If we'd interfered too much, if we'd guided you too directly, you wouldn't have developed the strength to make the hard choices. Like whether to sacrifice 4 friends to save 2 dimensions," Naruto thought and saw Rayleigh nod in understanding. "Leadership isn't about having the power to make decisions," the old pirate said. "It's about having the wisdom to make the right ones, even when they cost you everything." Around the crater, more translucent figures began to appear. Naruto recognized some from inherited memories, legendary pirates, marines, revolutionaries who had shaped their world through will and determination. Others were unfamiliar, but their presence carried the same weight of conscious choice and willing sacrifice. "We're offering you something," Whitebeard said, his voice carrying across dimensions with paternal authority. "The knowledge and support of everyone who has ever chosen to protect rather than dominate. Not as inherited memories that might override your personality, but as advisors you can consult when needed." "A council of kings," Rayleigh added with approval. "Each one of you connected not just to your own inherited memories, but to the collective wisdom of everyone who has ever faced impossible choices and chosen to do what's right." The offer was tempting, almost overwhelmingly so. To have access to the accumulated wisdom of legends, to never again face crucial decisions alone. "What's the catch?" Naruto asked, because there was always a catch. "No catch," Whitebeard replied, "but a responsibility. You become the bridge between worlds, not ruling either, but protecting both. When dimensional threats arise, you respond. When people need guidance with inherited power, you provide it." "We're already doing that," Sakura pointed out. "Yes," Rayleigh said with pride, "which is why we're offering to make it official. The Dimensional Inheritance Corps becomes something more, an organization that exists in both worlds, with authority from both, dedicated to maintaining the balance that keeps reality stable." Naruto looked around at the ghostly assembly, then back toward the village where his surviving friends were recovering from their ordeal. 28 inheritors who had chosen to stand together against impossible odds, who had proven that inherited power could be used to protect rather than dominate. "What do you think?" he asked Kurama silently. "I think," the Ninetales replied with rare seriousness, "that this is what we were always meant to become. Not just a Jinchuriki and his demon, not just a boy with inherited memories, but guardians of something larger than ourselves." "There's one condition," Naruto said aloud, causing the assembled spirits to pause in expectation. "We do this our way, no interference unless we ask for it, no guidance unless we request it. We've learned to make our own choices, we're not going to stop now." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Whitebeard laughed, his booming voice carrying across dimensions. "Kings don't follow orders, they make their own rules." "Then we accept," Naruto said, feeling the weight of decision settle on his shoulders like a familiar cloak. "But not just for us, for everyone we can reach, everyone who might someday need this kind of protection." The translucent figures began to fade, but their presence remained not as inherited memories or borrowed personalities, but as a connection to something larger. Naruto could feel it now, a network that spanned dimensions, linked every person who had ever chosen protection over power. "One last thing," Rayleigh said as his form became barely visible. "Remember that the greatest treasure isn't the power you inherit, it's the bonds you forge while learning to use it responsibly." As the spirits disappeared entirely, leaving Naruto and Sakura alone beside the dimensional crater, the morning sun seemed brighter somehow. Not because the world had changed, but because they finally understood their place in it. "So," Sakura said after a long moment of contemplative silence, "ready to be official guardians of reality?" Naruto grinned, and for the first time in days, it was genuine rather than forced. "Are we ever ready for anything we do?" "Good point," she replied with a laugh. "Should we go tell the others?" "In a minute," Naruto said, looking out across the scarred landscape toward the distant mountains. "I want to enjoy this moment first, the calm before the next storm." "There will always be another storm, kid." Rayleigh's voice was barely a whisper now, more memory than active presence. "That's what makes the calm moments precious. And that's what makes the bonds worth protecting," Naruto thought back, feeling more at peace with his inherited burdens than he ever had before. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, two young people who had been thrust into cosmic responsibility and chosen to embrace it rather than run from it. Around them, dimensional energy gradually settled into stable patterns, reality itself healing from the trauma of the past week. Somewhere in the distance, Naruto could sense his other friends beginning to stir, Sasuke practicing sword forms that belonged entirely to himself, Neji meditating on the nature of protection, the surviving network members gradually coming to terms with their losses and their victories. They would all need time to heal, time to process what they'd been through and what they'd become, but they would do it together as they had learned to do everything else. As family, as guardians, as the bonds that held reality itself together. The weight of kings had never felt so light because it was shared among so many willing shoulders. And for the first time since inheriting Rayleigh's memories, Naruto truly understood what it meant to be free. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom to choose how that responsibility was carried. Together, 5 years had passed since the dimensional crisis, and the world had settled into an uneasy peace. The Dimensional Inheritance Corps had evolved from a desperate alliance into a respected organization with chapters in every major village, their distinctive blue and silver insignia recognized across both dimensions as a symbol of protection and balance. Naruto stood on the observation deck of their newest facility, a floating headquarters that existed partially in both dimensions, allowing for unprecedented coordination between worlds. At 17, he had grown taller, his blonde hair longer and tied back in a style reminiscent of Rayleigh's youth. But it was his eyes that showed the greatest change. They held the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to carry power without being consumed by it. "The readings are getting worse," Sakura reported, entering the observation deck with a scroll of data. Her pink hair now reached her waist, and she wore the modified lab coat that marked her as the core chief dimensional analyst. 17 new instabilities this month alone, and they're not following any pattern we recognize." Naruto accepted the scroll, his enhanced perception immediately picking up the subtle wrongness in the energy signatures. "These aren't natural rifts," he said after a moment, "but they're not artificial either. It's like reality itself is becoming unstable," Sasuke finished, stepping onto the deck. The years had transformed him from a revenge-obsessed child into a man whose presence commanded respect across dimensions. His katana, now forged from metal that existed in both worlds simultaneously, rested easily at his side. "I've been consulting with the Spirit Council about it." The Spirit Council, the collective consciousness of dimensional guardians who had chosen transformation over death, had become an invaluable resource for understanding threats that spanned multiple realities. But lately, even their vast knowledge seemed insufficient. "What do they say?" Naruto asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "That something is hunting the barriers between worlds," Neji replied, joining their impromptu meeting. His presence had grown more profound over the years, carrying the protective warmth of someone who truly understood what it meant to guard something precious. Not trying to break them or merge them, hunting them. Like a predator stalking prey. The implications were chilling. In 5 years of dealing with dimensional threats, they'd faced madmen trying to merge worlds, entities seeking to consume them, and natural disasters that threatened reality itself. But this was something new, something that treated the barriers between dimensions as food. "Any idea what kind of entity could even do that?" Sakura asked, her analytical mind immediately working through possibilities. "Only one," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Kabuto approaching, but he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a figure that made everyone present tense, tall, pale, with long black hair and eyes that held depths no living person should possess. Orochimaru, Sasuke said, his hand moving instinctively to his sword. Indeed, the pale Sannin replied with a smile that held no warmth. Though I come not as an enemy, but as someone with vital information about the threat you're facing. And why should we trust anything you say? Naruto asked, his voice carefully controlled. The last time they'd encountered Orochimaru, he'd nearly destroyed both dimensions in his quest for power. Because, Orochimaru replied, his snake-like eyes showing something that might have been genuine fear, I've seen what's coming. And if we don't work together, neither of our dimensions will survive it. He gestured, and the air around them shimmered with dimensional energy. Images began to form, not holograms, but actual glimpses into spaces between worlds. What they saw made everyone present step back in horror. Vast, writhing shadows moved through dimensional space, consuming the barriers between realities like cosmic parasites. Where they passed, entire pocket dimensions collapsed, their energy absorbed into the growing mass of darkness. Void entities, Orochimaru explained, his usual arrogance replaced by scientific fascination tinged with terror. Beings that exist in the spaces between realities, feeding on the dimensional barriers that keep different worlds separate. How many? Neji asked, his Byakugan automatically activating to study the images. Unknown, Orochimaru replied, but based on the rate of barrier consumption, I estimate they'll reach our dimensional cluster within 6 months. Our dimensional cluster? Sakura's voice was sharp with concern. You didn't think there were only 2 worlds, did you? Orochimaru's smile returned, though it held no humor. The pirate world and the ninja world are just 2 nodes in a vast network of connected realities. If the void entities reach us, they consume everything, Naruto finished, understanding flooding through him. Not just our worlds, but every dimension connected to them. This is worse than anything we faced in the old world, Rayleigh's voice whispered in his consciousness. The old pirate's presence had become more subtle over the years, offering guidance only when requested, but now Naruto could feel genuine alarm in the familiar spirit. How do we fight something like that? Naruto thought back. I'm not sure we can, Rayleigh admitted, but I know someone who might have answers. Before Naruto could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in red as dimensional sensors registered massive disturbances across multiple realities. Report, Sasuke commanded, his authority as the core tactical coordinator carrying across the comm system. Massive void breach, Sector 7, came Ino's voice, tight with controlled panic. Something big just punched through the outer barriers. How big? Naruto asked, though he dreaded the answer. Continental-scale entity, possibly larger, Temuri's voice joined the communication. And it's moving toward inhabited dimensions. Through the facility's viewports, they could see it now, a shadow that moved through dimensional space like oil through water, consuming everything in its path. But this wasn't just another void entity. This was something that radiated malevolent intelligence, something that seemed to be actively seeking out populated dimensions. It's a scout, Orochimaru said with clinical detachment. The first of many sent to identify dimensions worth consuming. Then we stop it here, Naruto said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him the core unofficial leader. Signal all active members full mobilization, code Black protocols. Against something that size, Kabuto's voice carried Doflamingo's tactical cunning mixed with genuine concern. We'd need power levels comparable to the old world's Yonko just to get its attention. Then that's what we'll give it, Sasuke replied, his katana beginning to gleam with dimensional energy. 5 years of training together, 5 years of learning to combine our inherited abilities with our own skills. If we can't stop one scout, we have no chance against the swarm. Around the facility, the core membership began to mobilize. 53 active inheritors, each one carrying the memories and abilities of legendary figures while maintaining their own identity and purpose. They had faced impossible odds before and won through cooperation, determination, and the conscious choice to protect rather than dominate. But this felt different, this felt final. Kid, Kurama's voice rumbled through Naruto's consciousness with unusual gravity. There's something you need to know. The void entities, they're not just random predators. What do you mean? They're drawn to specific types of dimensional energy, the kind produced when inherited memories fully integrate with their hosts. The kind all of you generate just by existing. The implications hit Naruto like a physical blow. The core itself, their very existence as successful dimensional inheritors, was what was attracting the void entities to their reality cluster. "We're the bait," he said aloud, causing everyone to look at him. "Our successful integration of inherited memories is what's drawing them here." "Then we use that," Sakura said immediately, her analytical mind finding opportunity in crisis. "If they're attracted to our dimensional signatures, we can use ourselves as lures, draw them away from populated areas." "Into what trap?" Neji asked. "We don't have anything capable of containing entities that size." "Actually," Orochimaru said with a smile that was equal parts brilliant and terrifying, "we do. But it would require a sacrifice none of you are prepared to make." "What kind of sacrifice?" Naruto asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The dimensional barriers around our reality cluster could be collapsed intentionally," Orochimaru explained. "Create a controlled implosion that would trap the void entities in a pocket dimension while preserving the inhabited worlds." "And the cost?" "Everyone with dimensional inheritance abilities would be trapped in the pocket dimension with them," Orochimaru replied matter-of-factly. "Eternal guardians, keeping the void entities contained at the cost of never being able to return home." The observation deck fell silent except for the sound of alarms and the distant rumble of dimensional disturbances. Outside, the Shadow Scout continued its approach, its presence causing reality to blur at the edges. "There might be another way," Rayleigh's voice was thoughtful in Naruto's mind. "Something Roger mentioned once about the nature of inherited will." "What?" "He said that true inheritance wasn't about carrying someone else's memories or abilities. It was about taking their dreams and making them your own. And dreams can transcend dimensional barriers." Understanding began to dawn in Naruto's consciousness. Not just Rayleigh's understanding, but his own, the wisdom he'd gained from 5 years of leading the core, of learning to balance inherited power with personal choice. "There is another way," he said aloud, his voice carrying a certainty that made everyone present turn to look at him. "But it's not about trapping the void entities or destroying them. It's about transforming them." "Transform them how?" Sasuke asked, his tactical mind immediately engaged. "By giving them something better to feed on than dimensional barriers," Naruto replied, his plan crystallizing as he spoke. "Dreams, hopes, aspirations, all the positive energy that successful dimensional inheritance represents." "You're talking about feeding our own consciousness to cosmic parasites," Kabuto pointed out. "Not our consciousness," Naruto corrected. "Our inherited dreams, the accumulated hopes and aspirations of everyone whose memories we carry, freely given to transform predators into protectors." The idea was insane, unprecedented, and probably suicidal. But as Naruto looked around at his friends and allies, people who had spent 5 years learning to transform inherited power into protective strength, he saw the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his own heart. "If it works," Sakura said slowly, "we could turn the entire void entity swarm into guardians of dimensional stability." "And if it doesn't?" Neji asked. "Then we die trying to save everyone else," Sasuke replied with a slight smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." As the Shadow Scout drew closer and alarms continued to blare throughout the facility, Naruto felt a familiar sense of peace settle over him. This was what it had all been leading to: 5 years of training, growth, and learning to carry the burden of kings responsibly. One last voyage, one final gambit to protect both worlds and all the dimensions connected to them. "Signal the Spirit Council," he commanded. "Tell them we need every bit of inherited will they can channel through us, and signal all active core members we're about to attempt something that's never been tried before." As preparations began in earnest, Naruto looked out at the approaching darkness and felt not fear but anticipation. They had learned to carry the dreams of legends. Now it was time to use those dreams to transform nightmares into guardians. The last voyage of the Dimensional Inheritance Core was about to begin. The transformation began with a single voice, Naruto's, carrying across dimensional space with the weight of accumulated dreams. "I am Naruto Uzumaki," he called out to the approaching Shadow Scout, his consciousness expanding to encompass multiple realities. "I carry the dreams of Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King who chose guidance over domination, and I offer those dreams freely to transform your hunger into purpose." The void entity paused, its massive form rippling through dimensional space as if tasting something unexpected in the cosmic winds. Behind Naruto, the other core members began their own declarations. "I am Sasuke Uchiha," the swordsman's voice rang with quiet authority. I carry the perfectionism of Dracul Mihawk, tempered by the bonds I've chosen to forge. Take this dream of strength in service to others. I am Sakura Haruno, the analyst's voice carried across realities with scientific precision mixed with passionate determination. I carry Robin's thirst for knowledge transformed into wisdom used to protect. Accept this dream of understanding that preserves rather than destroys. One by one, all 53 active core members made their offerings, not their memories or abilities, but the distilled essence of what their inherited dreams had become through conscious choice and years of growth. The effect on the void entity was immediate and profound. Instead of the ravenous hunger they'd expected, something resembling curiosity began to emanate from its massive form. The shadow that had been consuming dimensional barriers began to slow, then stop entirely. It's working, Rayleigh's voice carried wonder and pride in equal measure. The dreams are resonating with something in its core nature, but then something unexpected happened. The void entity began to shrink, its massive form condensing not into nothingness but into something more defined. Where cosmic shadow had been, a figure began to emerge, tall, imposing, with features that seemed to shift between familiar and alien. When the transformation completed, what stood before them was recognizably humanoid but clearly not from any dimension they knew. The entity's eyes held the depth of someone who had seen the birth and death of countless realities, but now those ancient eyes sparkled with something new, purpose beyond mere consumption. I remember, the entity said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple dimensions. Before the hunger, before the endless feeding, It paused, as if struggling with concepts it hadn't considered in eons. I was a protector, we all were. All, Naruto asked, though he suspected he knew what the answer would reveal. The void entities, the transformed being continued, we were once guardians of the dimensional barriers, protectors of the spaces between worlds. But somewhere in the endless ages, we forgot our purpose. The barriers we were meant to protect became the only sustenance we could remember consuming. Understanding flooded through the core members' collective consciousness. The void entities weren't predators, they were guardians who had lost their way, cosmic protectors who had forgotten what they were meant to protect. Then we can help you remember, Sakura said, her analytical mind immediately grasping the implications. All of you, if the dreams we offered could transform one entity, they could transform the entire swarm, the entity finished, its newly awakened consciousness already working through possibilities. But it would require more than just your inherited dreams. It would require a permanent connection, a bond that spans dimensions and allows us to remember our purpose through your example. A covenant, Kurama's voice rumbled with ancient understanding. Like the bond between Jinchuriki and tailed beasts, but on a cosmic scale. What would that mean for us? Neji asked, his protective instincts immediately concerned about potential costs. You would become eternal guardians, the entity replied. Not trapped between dimensions like the spirits who guide you, but able to move freely between all realities while maintaining your connection to this one. Your descendants, your students, anyone you choose to train would inherit not just dimensional memories, but the responsibility of maintaining the cosmic balance. It was a staggering proposition. Instead of ending with their generation, the Dimensional Inheritance Corps would become a permanent institution spanning multiple realities, with members who could age and die and be replaced while maintaining continuity of purpose. There's something else, the entity continued, its transformed consciousness revealing deeper truths. The dimensional barriers we once protected, they're not just boundaries between worlds. They're part of a vast network that maintains the structure of reality itself. Without proper guardianship, the entire multiverse could collapse into chaos. How long? Sasuke asked, his tactical mind immediately focused on practical concerns. How long do we have before the other void entities reach inhabited dimensions? Days, perhaps hours, the entity replied grimly. But if you accept the covenant, if you become permanent guardians of the barriers, I can reach them before they arrive. I can carry your offered dreams to them, help them remember what we were meant to be. Naruto looked around at his friends and allies, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. 5 years of working together had taught them to trust each other's judgment, to make impossible decisions through collective wisdom rather than individual authority. What do the rest of you think? He asked, though he already knew what their answer would be. We've been guardians for 5 years already, Temari pointed out with a slight smile. Making it official just means we get better benefits. and will finally have the authority to coordinate protection across multiple realities, Shikamaru added with the strategic brilliance that had made him invaluable to their organization. No more wondering if our jurisdiction extends to other dimensions. Plus, Kinkuro said with a grin, imagine the stories we'll be able to tell our grandchildren. The decision was unanimous. As it had been 5 years ago when they'd first chosen to stand together against dimensional threats, the core members spoke with one voice. We accept, Naruto said formally, his words carrying the weight of a binding oath. We accept the responsibility of eternal guardianship, the burden of maintaining balance across all realities. What followed was unlike anything they'd experienced before. Instead of the violent dimensional energy they'd grown accustomed to, gentle light began to emanate from each core member. Not the golden glow of chakra or the silver shimmer of Haki, but something entirely new, a warm radiance that seemed to bridge the gap between different types of existence. The transformation was subtle but profound. Their bodies remained the same, but their consciousness expanded to encompass awareness of the dimensional network they were now bound to protect. They could sense the locations of barriers between worlds, feel the health of reality's structure, detect threats that existed in the spaces between dimensions. Most importantly, they could sense each other across any distance, through any dimensional barrier. The bond that had begun with shared inherited memories had evolved into something unprecedented, a permanent connection that would allow them to coordinate protection across infinite realities. It's done, the transformed void entity said with satisfaction. I can feel my kin responding already. Your dreams are spreading through the swarm, helping them remember what they were meant to be. Through their expanded awareness, the core members could sense it too, the approaching swarm of void entities beginning to slow, their ravenous hunger transforming into purposeful protection. What had been an invasion force was becoming a restoration effort, cosmic guardians returning to their proper role. So what happens now? Orochimaru asked, his scientific curiosity overriding any other concerns. What does eternal guardianship actually involve? You continue doing what you've been doing, the entity replied with something that might have been amusement. Protect your home dimensions, train new generations of inheritors, respond to threats that span multiple realities. The only difference is that now you have the authority and ability to act across the entire dimensional network. And backup, Naruto added with a grin, feeling the presence of thousands of transformed void entities taking up positions throughout dimensional space. Lots and lots of backup. As if summoned by his words, portals began opening around the facility. Not the violent rifts they were used to dealing with, but stable gateways that allowed easy travel between dimensions. Through them stepped figures that made several core members gasp in recognition. Pirates from the original world, Marines who had chosen protection over blind obedience, revolutionaries who had fought for freedom, all of them now bearing the same gentle radiance that marked the core members as eternal guardians. The covenant extends to both dimensions, one of the newcomers explained, a tall man with a red cloak and distinctive scars that marked him as Monkey D. Dragon. Everyone who has ever chosen protection over power, guidance over domination, can join the network of guardians. How many? Sakura asked, her analytical mind immediately wanting to quantify their new resources. Currently, several thousand across both dimensions, Dragon replied, but the number grows daily as more people choose to accept the responsibility. Naruto felt a moment of overwhelming gratitude. What had begun as his personal struggle with inherited memories had grown into something that spanned multiple realities, connected thousands of people who shared the common goal of protection and guidance. Proud of you, kid, Rayleigh's voice was filled with paternal warmth. You've created something Roger would have loved, a crew that spans dimensions and welcomes anyone who chooses to protect others. It's not just me, Naruto thought back, looking around at his friends and allies. It's all of us, everything we built together. That's what makes it perfect, Rayleigh replied with gentle approval. True kings don't rule alone, they inspire others to become kings themselves. The celebration was interrupted by a new alarm, but this one carried different tones, indicating not a threat but an opportunity. What is it? Sasuke asked, moving to the nearest console. Dimensional rift opening, Ino reported, her enhanced psychic abilities now spanning multiple realities. But it's stable, controlled, and, she paused, confusion creeping into her voice, it's coming from a dimension we've never detected before. Through the facility's viewports, they could see it, a perfectly circular portal that seemed to shimmer with rainbow light. And through it stepped a figure that made everyone present pause in amazement. She appeared to be about 10 years old, with bright eyes and hair that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of view. But it was her presence that marked her as something extraordinary. She radiated the same kind of inherited wisdom they'd all learned to recognize, but amplified beyond anything they'd encountered. "Hello," the child said with a smile that could have lit up entire dimensions. "My name is Joy, and I come from the first dimension, the one where all dreams begin." She looked around at the assembled guardians with obvious approval. "I've been watching your work for some time now, and I have to say you've exceeded even our highest expectations." Naruto asked, though he suspected the answer would reshape everything they thought they understood about reality. "The original guardians," Joy replied casually. "We've been protecting the first dimension since the beginning of existence, making sure that dreams and hopes continue to flow out to all the other realities. But lately, we've been thinking it might be time for some new perspectives." She gestured toward the transformed void entity, who had been listening with growing wonder. "Your success in transforming the void entities has proven that the network of dimensions is ready for a new generation of guardians, ones who understand that true strength comes from bonds rather than power." "What are you asking?" Sasuke inquired, his tactical mind immediately focused on implications. "I'm asking if you'd like to help us train the next generation," Joy replied with that brilliant smile. "Not just in your own dimensions, but across all realities. Help us make sure that every world produces guardians who choose protection over domination." The offer was beyond anything they'd imagined. To help train guardians across infinite realities, to ensure that the lessons they'd learned about inherited power and conscious choice spread throughout the dimensional network. "But our worlds," Neji said, his protective instincts immediately concerned. "Our responsibilities here will continue exactly as they have," Joy assured him. "You'll still be based in your home dimensions, still protect the people you care about. But now you'll also have the opportunity to help others learn what you've learned, to share the wisdom of conscious choice across all realities." Naruto looked around at his friends, seeing the same mixture of excitement and determination he felt in his own heart. They had started this journey as confused children struggling with memories that didn't belong to them. Now they were being invited to help shape the future of infinite realities. "Together?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Together," they replied in unison. "Then we accept," Naruto said formally. "The Dimensional Inheritance Core accepts the responsibility of training guardians across all realities." Joy's smile grew even brighter. "Wonderful. Then let me show you your new headquarters." She gestured toward the rainbow portal, and through it they could see something that took their breath away. A vast complex that existed in the space between all dimensions, with facilities for training, research, and coordination on a scale they'd never imagined. "Welcome," Joy said as they prepared to step through into their new role, "to the Academy of Eternal Guardians, where every student learns that the greatest treasure isn't the power you inherit, but the bonds you forge while learning to use it responsibly." As the core members stepped through the portal into their expanded destiny, Naruto felt a profound sense of completion. The boy who had once been afraid of losing himself to inherited memories had become a man who helped others find themselves through conscious choice. The weight of kings would always be there, but now it was shared among countless willing shoulders across infinite realities. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, the dreams of legends lived on, not as borrowed memories, but as freely given inspiration for anyone brave enough to choose protection over power. The voyage never truly ended. It just found new oceans to explore. 10 years later, a young girl with determined eyes stood in a training room within the Academy of Eternal Guardians, practicing sword forms that belonged to no single dimension but drew from the wisdom of many. Her instructor, a man with blonde hair and whiskers who carried himself with quiet authority, watched her progress with approval. "Remember," Naruto said gently, "the technique is just a tool. What matters is why you choose to use it." The girl nodded seriously, adjusting her stance. "To protect others, not to dominate them." "Good," Naruto smiled. "And what's the most important lesson about inherited power? That it's not about becoming someone else," the girl replied without hesitation. "It's about using their dreams to become the best version of yourself." "Perfect," Naruto said with pride. "I think you're ready for your first assignment." As the newest generation of guardians prepared to face the challenges of infinite realities, the legacy of conscious choice continued to spread. Dreams flowed freely between dimensions, inherited memories served as guidance rather than replacement, and the bonds forged through shared struggle protected reality itself. The Dark King's legacy lived on not in any single person, but in the eternal truth that real kings don't rule others. They inspire others to rule themselves. And across all dimensions, that inspiration continued to light the way toward a future worth protecting. The end. And there you have it, guys, Naruto's incredible journey from a confused kid with borrowed memories to the eternal guardian of infinite realities. We watched him struggle with Rayleigh's wisdom, form bonds that transcended dimensions, and ultimately learn that true kings don't rule others, they inspire others to become kings themselves. From that first nightmare about Roger's execution to training the next generation across multiple realities, this story was absolutely epic. What was your favorite moment? Was it when Naruto first used Conqueror's Haki, the insane battle against the dimensional manifestations, or maybe that mind-blowing finale with Joy and the Academy of Eternal Guardians? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And hey, if you enjoyed this absolute masterpiece, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because we've got more incredible fanfiction breakdowns coming your way. Got any story suggestions? Let me know what crossovers or concepts you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.